Hello and welcome to the Yggdrasil podcast. I am your host, Reddit Tosker. We have two returning guests again with us today, Monster Maze and Nintendo Bad Crisis. Thanks for coming, fellas.
Yeah, thanks for having me as always.
Yes, hello.
Uh, so Nintendo Black Crisis, have you finished the game? I need to make sure that.
I have finished the game. I'm still making my way through the first kind of playthrough, and getting all the shrines and quests and
Mhm.
stuff done. So, um, I'd say I'm a bit more behind compared to a lot of other people, but I have at least finished the story.
Okay. I was wanting to make sure that we weren't going to have to tiptoe and not spoil anything. But the
Yeah.
so first thing, uh, I've noticed that you guys and pretty much all of the larger Zelda YouTubers have not really been uploading anything so far. I'm assuming that
Mhm.
everybody's just really enjoying the game, and I guess when you're kind of established, you don't have like the need to engage in the rat race. You already have a thing, and you want to savor your first time, so you have more things of quality to talk about later. But are you guys working on anything so far?
Yes.
Yes.
The problem is mine is, well, first off, I also feel kind of like uncomfortable talking about anything in general because it's like, man, I still have so much I have to play. Because what if I miss something, you know? So it's trying to be just to have a very first thorough playthrough and also take it more slowly as you know more from the perspective of a fan and not a content creator. But I am working on an early game tips and tricks video. It's probably a bit more later for that, given that it's been over 2 weeks
Mm.
now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, you also need to consider that not everyone's going to be playing it immediately.
Right.
So when you do some initial videos, at least for me, I want to try and keep them less lore and more just maybe some other ideas, experiment a bit.
Plus, you've
Um,
been streaming a lot, right? You,
that's
you've
another
been,
thing, yeah, that was really
yeah.
quote unquote, holding me back. Not that I really regret it, because originally I was just going to stream the first 3 or 4 hours, and I was like, okay, that's it. After that, I'm gonna play on my own time. I'll upload it as no commentary to my other channel where I provide those the gameplay for people to use. I'll just do that. But then after I did that first stream, I had a lot of people were like, please continue your commentary. We really liked it and stuff, because they really wanted to see my first reaction. So I was like, okay, fine. So that then the issue was I couldn't really play until I was streaming. So,
Yeah,
I
I see.
at times I would have two streams a day, maybe 4 hours per stream.
Yeah. Wow.
But even then, that obviously that is a lot, but I didn't do it every day because the
I've
eight
seen your
hours
streams. It's like
yeah, it is a lot, and I
it's like a
still
4 hour
tried to at
stream.
least I still tried to, add and people are like, "Oh, it's fine. You can still experience it for yourself." So I didn't try to force commentary too much, but I still wanted to add stuff and be kind of, you know, uh, it, entertain people a bit. And I had to watch out for looking at chat because that was the main worry, to be spoiled. Sadly, I was spoiled about one thing particularly.
Uh-huh.
It was a pretty big thing, but aside from that, I I did a really good job avoiding spoilers for those 1 or 2 weeks before. So, um, but yeah, that's why because I didn't want to experience something on my second playthrough that I was gonna do anyways, and then see it for the second time on my stream, because then that reaction's gone.
Right.
Because I saw the Gloom Hands for the first time on my stream, so
The
uh,
gloom hands.
I didn't even know they were there. I was just up. I was just hearing some stuff going on below me. I was like, "Oh, cool chest." I went to go open it and stuff like that. You know, I go back to see the recording. You can see the Gloom hands like in the bottom right corner, just like wriggling around there. But I didn't see it. So then I turn the camera around and I just see these hands just coming towards me. I'm elevated on a platform, so I'm fine at the time. But I go down because I'm like, what? And then I see them come after me, and I'm like, Jeff's my horse. I'm like, Jeff, we gotta go now. And it's like it was perfectly comedic because like I Jeff isn't showing up, and then when they despawn, all of a sudden Jeff's coming up, and I'm like, Jeff, where were you? It's like he was hiding away when the Gloom hands were around. But yeah, that it was funny.
I had a similar experience with the Gloom. I've actually had a similar experience just with streaming. I also planned on doing just like 3 hours when I first got it. Maybe just do the tutorial island, and then like, all right, I'm getting rid of you. I don't want to see anybody for the next month. But then I found out, hey, this is really fun streaming this game because I I have a hard time streaming for long periods of times. It's slightly it's a dull constant um pressure because like I feel like it's interfering with my ability to just chill and enjoy the game. But with Tears of the Kingdom, I actually found it pretty easy. I kind of got hooked on it, and so I streamed a lot of my playthrough. Not the whole thing, but a lot of my playthrough, like 4 hours at a time. And I never go 4 hours at a time. You know, that's way above what I usually can tolerate in one sitting. Um, but I found that I hate my chat. Like I just hate. They backseat me all the time, and like I put warnings on it, like I put it the pinned comment. People have a very varied definition of what a spoiler is, or what like I don't want to know any mechanics. Like I don't want you to tell me anything. Like, oh, use fuse a ruby to your shield so you're not. I don't want. No, don't tell me that. Now I can never think of that on my own. It's gone from me now. Like that, the whole potential of me like thinking, hey, maybe I can fuse a ruby to my shield. Now I can never do it on my own because you told me. Stuff like that would just happen constantly, and eventually I
Right.
just had to stop. I just no. You're robbing me of too many little moments.
Hmm.
That's why I didn't stream at all. I said I might, like sporadically, just whenever, but I was just having too much fun on my own, where I was like, well, I know what's gonna happen. People are gonna be further than me in the game, and they're gonna share hints. And if I look back at my playthrough now, I can already tell that had I streamed it, I would have not I wouldn't have come up with some of the very, very creative solutions that I came up with by myself because I just didn't know. Not the intended way, probably, but still, it worked. And I think that's what this game is all about. It's all about finding little things that you're like, oh, I can just do it like that. And then you think about it a little bit longer after you're done, and you're like, I think they probably intended it to do it this way, but what the heck? It worked. So let's just go with it.
When I was
It's
when I
fine.
was streaming, it's kind of funny because I felt like I always would just go into a shrine and be like, okay, uh, let's make it a challenge to just like solve this some other way.
Yeah,
That
that's
that way
fun.
that way people can't get upset at you because like, oh, you're supposed to do this, but you're like, oh, no, no, no. The whole point right now is I'm trying to find a way to do it my way. It's like, oh, you can't complain because I'm not trying to do it the intended way. And that's also what you say when you're genuinely stuck and you're like, oh no, I know how to do it. I actually do know how to do it. I don't know how to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the best.
Dude, the Link's abilities, when combined, they're overpowered.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Ultra
They're,
Hand and Recall, you just like make a pretty big platform and you just extend it out for a bit, bring it back, get on it, recall, you just get sent over.
yeah, the recall in Ultra Hand, it could be the solution to so many things if you start using them. There's a
Yep.
lot of little problems that get solved with just those two. What do you think of the shrines,
Yes.
by the way? Nintendo Black Crisis, especially in comparison to Breath of the Wild. What's your shrine opinion?
Obviously, I'm still getting through it, and like I'm only just now reaching the like maybe halfway point of completing all of them. But I like what I've been playing so far, and I especially really like how they have that new sort of test of strength variant where they remove your equipment. It's kind of like mini Trial of the Sword shrines. I love it. It's so good. But I have such a bad habit of like getting hit like at the very start, and literally the hit will take away everything. I have a quarter health left. I'm like, okay, well I'm complete. Like I had that happen. It was the one where like they have the time bombs they throw at you. I did recall one, but I had like three other ones being thrown at me, so I got hit like immediately. Um, so I had to go through the entire thing with a quarter of a heart, and it's literally at the point where I have to watch out for when they're throwing those little pebbles at me because that could kill me. It was so. Oh, but it's great. I love the how they did that. That's such a improvement to the test of strength because I did not like that. I guess it would still be nice if they could not always have like blessing shrines. Those are still really abundant, and I know how in Breath of the Wild the puzzle was supposed to be getting into these shrines to begin with, but some of the puzzles were so straightforward and simple that I would have liked to be rewarded with another puzzle instead. So I would have, from what I've seen, it would be nice if some of these blessing shrines did actually have some little puzzles attached to them. But again, they do have more in this game, 152 apparently. So
there,
there's going to be blessing shrines, but I like them.
there was a couple of blessing shrines that juked me, and I thought it was just a blessing shrine. And it's like, okay, I just walk up to Raru and get my light thing.
I
But
okay, I've heard of that. I think I saw a bit of a clip of something, but I haven't experienced that yet.
oh,
So,
okay, okay, never mind,
yeah,
never mind
yeah.
then.
Unfortunately, just seeing that clip, I'm like, okay, well, that kind of ruins it. But
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
whatever.
I've only had one of those, so I don't know how many of those like they throw you off.
It's fun.
Where
It
you're
was
like, oh,
fun.
it's a blessing shrine.
Yeah, it was fun. Uh, Overall, I just like the shrines a lot. Which is funny because the shrines in Breath of the Wild are probably one of my worst, the things I dislike the most. But these shrines, I just really like Ultra Hand. I like Ultra Hand and Fuse and Ascend, and I like how the shrines are, use all your bullshit. Just figure it out. Use all the things that you have access to, and clear the shrine. It's just a lot more, I guess, active than Breath of the Wild's shrines.
Yeah, the last time I was on your podcast, I said I didn't really care for the shrines that much, but I have changed my mind quite a lot about that, to be honest. Obviously, I was a lot earlier into my playthrough back then, but yeah, I think they are definitely an improvement. It's still not my favorite part of the game. I like the more organic challenges, like the caves and some of the stuff in the depths, but I have changed my mind. It's they're very creative. They're a huge improvement over the previous game.
Mm. What about you, Monster Maze? You're working on a video on the depths. Is that your first thing that you're going to be doing?
No, my first video is gonna be just a little list of lore, which are mostly disconnected from the main game, or the main story, I should say. So it's just like a top 10 or like maybe 15 little lore details, just little things that you find that are like, oh, that's cool that they explain it that way.
I have one for you because I was thinking about. I've been kind of trying to jot down stuff because I might do a similar topic, but you might, you probably have already seen it, but it's a good one to add to your video. So on the plateau, there's a royal claymore by that Rome's grave.
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah, that's
and
awesome.
that seems like a reference to Age of Calamity.
Well, I can
So-
give you a few cliff notes of some of the stuff I've written down. Not all of them are like great. It's not going to be a video where it's like a countdown because some of them only take like 30 seconds to explain. But it talks about like how these new dinosaur creatures, those dondons, they're called. They're supposed to be the ancient ancestors of all the horses in Hyrule, which I thought was pretty cool. How there's a spring right below the shrine where the Shrine of Resurrection is, like right below that in the depths. There's there's a spring, so maybe that's why it was built there. Because
Yeah,
those
yeah. I did notice that.
revitalizing, yeah, there's like a revitalizing aspect to that water, so maybe that's why which would mean that the ancient Sheikah were aware of the depths and the potential it hold, or maybe they just knew that there was something special about that place, and that's why they built it there. There's a Yiga entry that talks about how those bargaining statues can steal souls of people. That was pretty dark. It's like, oh yeah, some of our people, they approached these statues and their soul got stolen. It's like, whoa, they just happened to run across that statue and they died
And
essentially.
you're talking about like the bargain statue, not the horned one. So the
Yeah, the
one
bargaining
interesting.
statue. Yeah.
It does make
Uh,
me wonder if like it's somehow related to the horn statue, but not sure.
yeah.
Because
That
the horn statue, I don't, when you talk to it, I don't think it gives you much new stuff.
No, not
It's just
really.
kind of like the same old
It
lore,
just
but
talks about how it's an entity that kind of mirrors Hylia in a way, and how dark and light are supposed to, like, Hylia didn't outright kill it or obliterate it because it was like a necessary part of the equation,
mhm.
like the flip side
Yeah, that was very
part of.
odd. I was like, that's you're kind of important to be like a minor NPC statue over here.
Well, in general, the statues are very interesting because it seems like these entities can talk through these statues, but they're not necessarily gods. They're like these,
Why can
because
why can the
even the
bargainer statue talk through the goddess statue in the Great Plateau in the first
It's
place?
funny. It's funny
yeah
you say
yeah
that because I just like that's something that I just recently did. Unfortunately, I haven't completed that quest related to that. But I was thinking, that's kind of weird.
yeah, how they can channel themselves through a statue.
It's also the fact that when I saw the first bargaining statue, I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting lore. So they're originally from the depths, and this is the only one up here. And then I find the other one on the plateau, and I'm like, oh, okay, so there's more that are on the surface. What? So yeah, it's interesting.
But yeah, I got a whole list. It's like 16 different little things. I think that probably the biggest one is about the Gibdos and where they came from and some of the lore implications behind them because they look more like insects now. But there is a entry that kind of hints to certain lore details, which is pretty cool. So that's probably going to be the big one for that video, and the rest are just going to be tiny little things like how the hot springs in Hebra have lava below them in the depths, and that's why they're. I don't know. That's like just a little. It's a cool little detail that they put in. Like, it's supposed to be a very frozen area, but somehow there's these hot springs here, which are not supposed to be there because it's a very frigid climate.
Here's a
And
cool
I
one
think,
that I think you probably, I don't know if you have on your list. You know the reward you get for doing all the shrines is the ancient.
I haven't got to that part yet.
You don't know about the
I
reward?
think
I do
I
know.
might
Yeah.
know from an accidental glance. But
Well,
like I was talking to Monster Maze about it before. He's like, "Oh, you want to know? It's a really cool thing." And
it's
I'm like,
super
"I don't."
cool.
And I was like, "I don't know if I want to know then."
It's
What do you?
probably one of the
I
coolest lore
It's
okay.
details in
extremely
the
cool.
whole
What do you
game.
think it is? What did you see accidentally?
I think from my suspicion as well as the glowing glance I got, I think it might be an outfit related to the hero on the tapestry.
Do you want me to tell you? Can we just confirm it or not confirm it?
Fine.
Yeah, it's a hero of the tapestry
Oh
outfit.
yeah, of course,
Yeah, it
of
is.
course.
Yeah.
It's super interesting.
And what does he look like a Zona or something?
It looks like a cross between a Zonai and a Hylian, which would kind of fit between.
Okay, yeah, okay, yeah. I had my suspicions because I figured since Breath of the Wild did it, Tears of the Kingdom would also give an outfit.
I'm actually surprised because in general they don't connect many things between Breath of the Wild and like the lore that was set up in that game. So I was surprised to see it
It is
in
it
this
is kind
game.
of strange. It feels like even like parts in Breath of the Wild were sort of retconned.
Oh, for sure.
It,
Yeah.
it seems like some quests are non-canon, and some things you just didn't do, and some people just didn't talk to canonically, or not. Like, did you guys happen to see the video that I recently put out? Uh,
What was it
Yeah.
about? I
it,
don't know if I've seen it.
it's I made a video, and it was about how people assume that Link and Zelda are living together, and I don't think that they are. Um, and so, like, so some of the things that I point out is that if they're living together and Link owned that house in Breath of the Wild, but what's being alleged is that Link owns the house, and when he saved Zelda, they moved in together, and they're both living in Hateno Village, and that's just where they live, and they've been doing that for years. Like, I don't know exactly how long the time skip is supposed to be, but it's got to be like 5 years or something, because Hudson's kid didn't exist in Breath of the Wild, and now it looks like it's like 5 or 6 or something.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a long time skip. It's like at least 5 years. So they've been living in Hateno Village for 5 years. Zelda established a school. But I started up a new save file just to confirm this, and nobody in Hateno Village knows who Link is. Like, not a
Nope.
single person, not one villager knows who you are. And it's not just that they don't recognize you. It's not as simple as them being neutral to Link. It's they go out of their way to say, "I don't know who you are." Whereas like the mayor is like, "I've never seen you around here before." The mayor's wife that cleans the house, she's like, "Hey, you're that customer I saw at that clothing store." It's like, "Oh, that's how
Yeah,
you,
they all treat you like a traveler.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
you must be a traveler passing through. Cool. Well, it's like, well, if he lived there, that wouldn't be the case.
And the worst ones are the kids that they're famous for Zelda's famous among the kids. Like the kids love Zelda. These kids used to come to there every day. The ladies, like, they used to come in here all the time into this house, crowding up the room. And actually, it's the kids are the reason why the well why Zelda needed a private space. It wasn't to hide from Link; it was to hide from the children. Uh,
Oh yeah, I was about to say that's
Those
the
little
only
brats.
yeah,
that's the only part where I was like, maybe they're living together because she needed
Yeah.
a private space. But
Yeah.
now that you say it like that,
No.
that
Yeah,
makes
that is
makes more
interesting.
sense.
Mhm.
Because there's
Um,
only one bed too, like a
Yeah.
one person bed. Clearly,
small, very small
a
bed.
small. Yeah.
And what else? So it's just it just doesn't add up, because there are people that recognize you in other places. So it's not just like they didn't have anybody recognize you. There's people that recognize you in Kakariko. There's people that recognize you in the Goron area, in the Zora area, in the Rito area, in the Gerudo area. Everybody knows who you are.
Well, even Tarrytown, which
Yeah.
is they're like, oh, hey, you're the guy who helped us establish this town, which is only possible if you bought the house
Yeah.
in Breath of the Wild. So yeah,
I
it
just
doesn't really add up.
yeah, Nintendo's doing something weird. I think it's probably because they don't want to be having all of these situations where people recognize Link and new players that didn't play Breath of the Wild are confused. I think that's probably why they're doing this. It's just a gameplay contrivance.
It probably is why. I don't think it's that huge of a deal though. They should have just, you know, had
I
people.
th-
Some
What bothers
people
me is
say,
Bolson.
"Oh, hey,
What bothers me is Bolson. Just
Yeah,
like
I
his
think-
specifically really really bugs me that Bolson doesn't know who you are. Like, I gave that
Yeah.
man a lot of money for that house.
and a lot of wood.
I just don't see the big deal as to why they can't just like have them recognize Link. It's not it isn't like it's not like it ruins the game, but
No,
it's just like a bit of a minor nitpick I have.
there's a theory going. Well, okay. Did you guys notice that there's a cutscene, the cutscene where Link and Zelda get the Master Sword? There's a cutscene with
Oh, one
the
second.
Deku Plate.
Sorry, my phone is going off. Oh, you can cut that out.
No problem. There's a cutscene with the Deku Tree. Link and Zelda go to get the Master Sword, and the way the Deku Tree is like, "Oh, hey, the Master Sword's all healed now. You guys can take it." And the way he says that is like, "Wait a minute." He's saying that like we didn't have the Master Sword when we beat Ganondorf. Did either of you get that sense?
No, I figured that they went back to return it to maybe like strengthen it again or something.
So
Yeah,
like,
I
like
don't
it
know.
got damaged during the last fight.
Yeah.
Mm.
Are you thinking that like
I feel like
that Breath of the Wild stuff didn't happen, or is that
some of the Breath of the Wild stuff didn't happen.
The
I,
trial of the sword for sure didn't happen.
why that one?
Well, that's why you like upgrade the sword to a point where it's just they imply like the sword is now fully restored. It will glow indefinitely now. It's
Oh
at
yeah,
the peak
that's
of its
true.
power.
and it's still only
And
30 in the base game. I mean, in Tears of the Kingdom, it's still at
well,
its pre
well,
Trials of the Sword
yeah.
power.
Well, in general, DLC doesn't seem to matter in this story because all the stuff that you collected as through an DLC, like all those outfits, they're now no longer Link's possession, and now suddenly you're finding them in chests in areas like the depths, which didn't exist or weren't even known about in uh, or in caves that weren't there before. So they clearly pretend and that part does kind of bother me because there was lore attached to that. Like this Misco bandit guy, he supposedly went into a vault in the castle and he stole all these outfits and armor and he distributed it all across Hyrule in the DLC, I mean, in Breath of the Wild. And you would find random chests across Hyrule and you would obtain these places. And it would contain things like Majora's Mask, Tingle's outfit, Ravio's hat
There is
thingy.
at least one thing from the DLC that transfers over. If you have the Champion's Ballad picture, that transfers over to Zelda's house.
Yeah, it's just in
It's
it's
inconsistent.
just not, yeah, it's inconsistent. It doesn't it
That's-
cherry picks
Yeah, that's the
the
problem
things
for
that
me.
it wants.
It's the inconsistency because, like I mentioned, Bolson doesn't recognize you. What if you just didn't do the Bolson quest? Because that's the only thing that would not bother me. The thing is like, not only did it give him money, like we talked a lot. We had like a heart to heart there at the end before he decided to go off on his journey. Gives you life advice. Um,
He did a dance for me.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
we're bros.
We
all
went to
right?
the wedding. We went to Hudson's wedding together.
Yeah. It seems like they just didn't want to go all the way with it, where they assume everybody has played Breath of the Wild, which I can understand. But I've played plenty of games where they do the same thing, and I was never bothered by it. The first
I'm more bothered by
Metro,
this.
Yeah.
like the first
Yeah.
Metro game I've ever played was Metro Exodus, which is the third installment in the series. And a lot of characters already were established and they know you. And I was never bothered by it. I was like, okay, so this guy knows me. I guess I missed something from the previous games that I don't know about. And then I went back and played the other two games and it all, fell into place.
For a kingdom that's recently been ruined, there's an awful not lot of talk about the calamity.
Yes.
I like how they at least like have those books that kid reads in the school, so it's kind of cool to see it passed down there. And I get that they wouldn't want to talk about it much because they're trying to rebuild Hyrule, but
Yeah.
you think it would be discussed. It's funny. I told Don this, but I did listen to a good amount of your podcast with him a bit after Tears of the Kingdom released, and I totally agree with what you talked about of like, where is this Sheikah technology? Like, what the heck?
Okay.
Yeah.
Has anyone
Here we go.
have a satisfying answer for the Sheikah tech? Does anyone have any ideas?
Okay, at best, all I can assume is that they used part of it for the towers, but there was still a lot of Sheikah tech. Like, they didn't make that tower to Sheikah tech ratio. There's still way more Sheikah tech. There's nothing in the
yeah.
Shrine of Resurrection.
Yeah.
I guess maybe they could get rid of it because they could be worried that it'd be taken over again. But like, I don't even have to see it.
See, all of those are kind of
I
satisfying.
I don't even have to see evidence. Just like have someone acknowledge it. Someone tell me what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
All you have to do is make a slight, like tiny word about it. Like I don't care what the answer is because all of those are reasonable-ish explanations. Like whenever I talk about it, people in my comment sections are like, Well, they just repurposed it. They repurposed it, all of it, all of it. It like
How
not.
do you repurpose those giant divine
How do you
beasts? They were
repurpose the divine beasts? And where's the scrap? Where's the remains? And it's like, what's the purpose of like repurposing the shrines? Like for what? Where's the why would you take the tech off the walls of the Shrine of Resurrection? Like just for the towers? You're telling me it took, and how did you do this in like 5 years? Those
Well,
shrines
I
go
can see.
underground.
I can see the shrines and towers and pillars, those going back underground or something, because we've seen that like functionality. They've talked at least
Oh
about
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
but it's the divine beasts, the Shrine of Resurrection, which has like been excavated out
yeah. Mm-hmm.
for some reason. Just not like those are the things where it's like what?
Because I
well,
could
to
see
me,
them.
it all comes down to world building. Like, you have to present some sort of explanation that is satisfactory. For me, it just doesn't make sense that they would strip. Yeah, I would much rather go back to the Shrine of Resurrection and the whole thing is just still there, but it's all overgrown and there's vines
And it's turned off
there.
or
And
something, like the technology turned off.
it turned off. Yeah, why would they strip the walls? You know how much work that would be, and I don't know. It just it really did bother me in a lot of ways because they're not rewarding you for knowing the lore, especially after if it was just Breath of the Wild, okay, but they put out a whole book explaining all that stuff to cater to people like me who are invested in the lore, and I feel like I wasn't rewarded for knowing all these things because they just leave it out.
It just
They just don't acknowledge it.
no explanation is reasonable. Is the thing. Like it's not even that it's bothersome. It's like all possible explanations have issues and they don't address it at all. So let's assume, okay, well they defeated Calamity again and the technology served its purpose. It all shut down. Okay, look, if that first of all, if that was the case, it would just like the towers would just go back underground and the shrines would just go back underground. It wouldn't
Yes.
just like, or they'd turn off or something, but like they wouldn't turn back to rocks or anything. Like it wouldn't turn to stone because first of all, those things are at least 10,000 years old.
Yeah,
And
they've survived for tens of thousands of years. Like,
yeah, and the Calamity Ganon's not actually gone is the thing. Like, because I'm assuming we're all in agreement that Calamity Ganon is a manifestation of Ganondorf's like miasma, you know, his gloom coming out and manifesting over like centuries because he's locked away, and the Calamity Ganon came out, and that's his, you know, that's just the form that he's taking. It's like a Phantom Ganon, but it's a Phantom
Yes.
Ganondorf. Even if we stop the Calamity, because they talk about that in the histories that they stopped the Calamity over and over. Link would stop the Calamity for huge amounts of time. That's why the Sheikah noticed that there was this pattern. That's why they prepared the divine beasts and the shrines. There's going to be another one. Like even in the lore of just Breath of the Wild, you know, Ganondorf's still down there producing miasma. He's going to make another one at some point, even if he
Yeah.
stayed sealed away.
well, plus, like I can get. I get that they wanted to get rid of the Guardians and maybe even the Divine Beasts because they are at risk now. They kind of figured out like, well, he can just overwrite the system and take them over again. So let's get rid of these because clearly that's not going to help us in the future. But the towers, like the towers were meant to scan for his presence. Why would they get rid of these? Or the Shrine of Resurrection for that matter? Wouldn't that be extremely helpful to keep around in case someone dies again? Like,
That's a Yiga hideout.
yeah, it's a Yiga hideout now, but just in general, it doesn't. But again, simple world building things that you have to at least explain, but they just refuse to. Pura managed to reverse. She invented the answer to aging. She managed to preserve herself and give herself a second life because she used to be like over 100. Yeah, like 100, 120, something around along those lines. But then we see Robbie and Impa, they're super old and crusty, and they're nearing the end of their lifespan. And Pura is this woman now who looks like she's in her 20s, and she looks really good.
Really good.
Yeah.
Oh no, she's hot.
Yeah. Oh no, she's hot. And I'm like, at least explain why you wouldn't grant that type of technology, that option to Robbie and Impa.
Yeah.
At least explain
A
why.
word, a line.
I can totally believe that it's just because they decided not to.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I would accept that.
But I think again the issue is just they don't address it.
Yeah, just have
The
a few
topic does
lines in
not
there.
come up. Yeah.
Yeah, have a few lines in there that just says like, well, it's very experimental and it's dangerous and we don't know the consequence. Like,
Or they want to die a natural death. They've lived their lives. Like anything. I just want a single blurb, a line in a diary somewhere saying something along those lines. Oh, the Sheikah technology was, we dismantled it because it was too dangerous. The gloom came and it attacked it and it reduced it to dust. Anything,
Yes.
any kind of explanation that you want to give me, I'll accept it. But just don't pretend like all of this. So the theory that I was telling you about is that some people think that when Zelda went back into the past, at that moment she messed up the timeline, and that's why a lot of these things aren't making sense.
oh no.
That is kind of a funny thought though.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, because like, are we to assume that it has to be then like a Skyward Sword case where how you can see in the back room there was like a crystal. You can never go in there, and then you realize later on that Zelda's actually in there, like from the present because she went back, and obviously they're exploring. Tears of the Kingdom starts with them exploring those ruins, and they can't see their murals, but we know that Zelda's on there.
Right.
So obviously it means that everything up until like
It already happened.
We're meant to we're expected then to believe that it's not just that, but like Zelda was always a dragon flying around, even during like Calamity Ganon's time, all that time, and also it means that there were two Master Swords in existence, because like we have the one in the Lost Woods, and then that same Master Sword is up being healed.
Yep.
So like it's just quite bizarre because it makes you then, because you are gonna think like, okay, if she was always here, then how does this make sense? How does that make sense? This could only be possible if, it was changed. What about the fact that the second she goes in the past, all of a sudden there are those geoglyphs?
Yeah,
if they were
should have
always
already been
in
there.
the ground, they would have always been there.
Well,
So
granted, Nintendo's never been very good at writing time travel consistently. Even
Yeah.
as far back as Ocarina of Time, it already didn't make a whole lot of sense because,
Yeah.
you plant the beans and then suddenly the plants appear in the in the future. It's a full-grown plant all of a sudden, but not until you plant that seed. But then there's other situations where people already know something before you did it.
Yeah.
So that's a contradiction. That's two different principles. And I get it. Like time
they're
travel.
always doing paradoxes like that.
But basically, the Zelda becoming a dragon and all that stuff in the past, which is currently technically in the current day, it kind of like is a bigger example, I guess, of that Song of Storms paradox. The paradox. It's
Yes.
basically like that.
Yeah, like you learn a song from someone before you even did it. So you should have already done that in the past, but yeah. I mean, that's why it's called a paradox. It doesn't make any sense. I know, but that's kind of my biggest issue is that I totally don't mind that people enjoy this story because it's a Zelda story and people are excited. And I think I said before the stream started, I said, like, we're still in the honeymoon phase of this game. So if you voice criticism now, people are gonna get onto you for it. my biggest issue is that people will come up with excuses for it. And then I feel like if I have to make excuses for bad writing, then that's not really a solution. That's just trying to put a patch on it. Like, put some, trying to excuse their mistakes that they made. And I think it's totally fair to call out certain things in the story that just don't make sense when you really think about it. I'm not really the biggest stickler for continuity errors or little mistakes. Ocarina of Time, I've always been able to deal with the Song of Storms paradox. In fact, it was kind of funny to me. It's like, yeah, it's mysterious. It's time travel, and time travel in general is because it doesn't exist in our own world, at least not that we know of. The laws of nature really don't seem to allow time travel in the way that we write it in our fiction. So making mistakes or making things in a way, or writing it in a way where it doesn't totally make sense, that's fine. I can deal with that. There's very little time travel movies or time travel games where it 100% makes sense. But
I don't think there's any that makes sense, because time travel doesn't make sense because it's not real. Like, it inherently doesn't make sense. But yeah, I see what you're
it's
saying.
such an intangible concept to us humans in our real world that you can get away with a lot of mistakes, because who knows if time travel really did exist in our world, who knows how it would work. So that in that sense, I think it's fine. But there's simple things in the story. Or some of the stuff we've already talked about, just not acknowledging or explaining certain things which don't really help with the world building. I think the world building is very important to me as someone who loves Tolkien and more like other classic fantasy or story writing, where everything has been thought out very thoroughly. Not saying that Tolkien is perfect, but you can.
There's a clear difference.
Yeah, it's very hard to find issues with his stories. Like, you can count them on one hand, probably. But in this small little story, which is, it's not even a huge story, there's just so many little things where I'm like, that just doesn't make sense. This is not how characters should react in this situation. I think I pointed out one of them on Twitter, where it's like, it's kind of a shame.
Well, hang on. I know where you're going with this. Let me set something up first. So, first of all, everybody on this podcast loves this game. We love Breath of the Wild, right? I'm assuming.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
No, I hate it.
No, Nintendo Life Crisis hates it. You heard it here first, fellas.
It's not a masterpiece.
Yeah. He's going to do his own version of a who's that YouTuber? Joseph Anderson video, just criticizing.
No, like I unironically did do one for Breath of the Wild.
Really?
Yeah. It was titled in a similar way. Yeah, Breath of the Wild. Why it's no masterpiece.
That's awesome. That's interesting.
That's what I was referring to.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I got given the topic, you'd imagine got a lot of criticism for that.
So
it was. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yep.
Well, I was just gonna say, I have a lot of nitpicks that build up. Like, I don't think this game is perfect. I don't think it's time to talk about them in like a formal video. I have this review that I'm working on, and I'm trying to, I'm being fair because I really love this game, but when I'm looking at these nitpicks and I'm looking at the kinds of reactions I see online to criticism, it's like, oh, it's not time yet. Like, these people will roast me alive if I upload all of my criticisms and critiques. People don't want to listen to the whole thing that I have to say. They want to latch on to certain specific phrases and be combative against those and justify what are just clear mistakes in my opinion. that Nintendo made in telling the story. So
plus, if you do it too early, you might risk that it is actually explained in that one side quest that you didn't do yet, because the game is so huge,
gigantic.
Yeah. Well, that's I was gonna say that, like, eventually there did come a sort of time where all of a sudden it felt like being critical of Breath of the Wild was like a socially acceptable thing.
Yes.
And I was just gonna mention that, like, yeah, when I made my video on the Breath of the Wild critique, it was still, it wasn't like, you know, a month after the game released, but it was still within that first year. So, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, no, you're wrong about this and that. But then I noticed that eventually people were like, oh, you know, the shrines are a bit repetitive, and the bosses aren't that good, you know. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, everyone's talking about this, and it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess now it's fine to you know, critique it, but
People are very passionate.
That's just how it is. Yeah.
Yeah, people are just very passionate, and if they're enjoying something greatly, they're not going to be as receptive to criticism as opposed to when the dust settles and they had some time to think about it and stew on it a little bit. And I think that's going to be the same case with Tears of the Kingdom. As time progresses, people will become... Because I had the same thing. When I started playing the game, just like in the first few hours, everything was amazing. Like there was nothing wrong with the game. And then as I started getting further and further into the game, I started noticing a few things. And you can do that with anything.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I would have been viscerally opposed to somebody criticizing the game during the early, you know, even the first week, I would say, because there was definitely a point where I was playing Tears of the Kingdom, and I was like, oh, this is my favorite Zelda game. Best Zelda game ever made. Like, there was 100% a point where I was like, this is the most fun I've had on a Zelda game ever, and there are no flaws anywhere. It's perfect. It's beautiful. And you know what? I still think it's the most fun I've ever had on a Zelda game. Like, and my criticisms don't change that.
Yeah, Tears of the Kingdom, like when I was playing through it, I just thought this like fixes pretty much everything that I was, you know, upset about with like Breath of the Wild and disappointed with. And while I do think I don't hate the story, but while I do think it's definitely the weakest part of Tears of the Kingdom, as so far from what I've played, this game's definitely my favorite Zelda game. Just a lot of it just comes from the gameplay, and it's so good. I love the enemies variety and the new bosses and mini bosses.
Well, that's the thing. So far, everything we've said that are nitpicks or criticisms, they're all related to story and world building.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. None of it, because the gameplay is amazing. What they've been able to achieve.
It's so good.
Yeah, what they've been, from a technical standpoint, like a game design standpoint, this is incredible. And I've already seen so many, like, actual game designers reacting to this and being like, this is just crazy that they...
I saw... did you see the wheel bridge thing that people were freaking out about?
Yes.
Yeah. Apparently that's like a big deal because you see people freaking like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm like, oh yeah, it's a wheel pulling a thing. It's like, I don't know. I don't know how, but it's amazing. So
yeah, it's because it's
physics,
reacting.
I guess.
Yeah, it's reacting in a way like it's supposed to react.
Yeah.
Not consistently, or something. Consistently over and over throughout the game. Like, I've had no bugs when it comes to Ultra Hand yet, and I've played like 150, 200, like almost 200 hours.
Wow. Well, yeah. Well, didn't they say like the game was practically done a year ago, and they've just been perfecting this?
Yeah, the whole year. They delayed it just to like polish it. It's like, and you see that, and well, in a way, it's kind of sad because you think, wow, this should be the norm. But like, it has gotten to the point where so many game devs will just get out a game and then patch it later.
Especially recently, with the amount of apologies we've been getting lately.
What was it? The Golem game, the Redfall game,
the Redfall.
even games that are kind of good, like the Jedi Survivor, also came out not running well. Like, all of these games just come out. It's becoming a culture thing. There's an expectation that these games are going to be shitty on release, and then they'll just, we'll patch it out. Callisto Protocol, like all the time this
Oh
just
yeah,
happens.
Callisto. Yeah,
Well,
you're
because
right.
they also
I forgot
know
about that one.
they also know that if they do that and they immediately respond, there'll be people saying, "Wow, more devs should be doing this immediately, like reacting to the problem." But it's like this shouldn't be a problem to begin with. If
No,
they took time, then yeah.
it's the only type of medium where that is even possible, I feel.
Imagine going to a movie.
Yeah, imagine going to a movie.
And like half of it is still in the that block phase where like they haven't like tweened the animation or whatever. I forget the phrase. And then they have like an official response. Like, we're
Afterwards.
sorry, we'll
Yeah.
patch this. It's like, wow, how commendable. I'll buy another ticket and then come see it next week and hope that it's fixed.
You can watch version 1.11 next week
Like,
in theaters.
Yeah, when they advertise the movies now, they have to put like the version down. It's like, honey, this isn't the right version.
You got to update it. It's funny
Yeah,
because like Nintendo gets a lot of flack for a lot of things they do, but you have to give them credit where it's due. This game, they said it was basically done a year ago, and they're like, no, we're going to take a whole year to make sure that it's just polished, that make sure the interactions work. And then they succeeded at what they were trying to do. Like, these developers are losing their minds looking at that bridge, looking at the little chain with the wheel that turns the door, opens the door. Like, a lot.
That was so cool. I loved seeing that puzzle. I was like, whoa.
It's like for like the first week on the daily, I'd see developers just losing their minds over there and explaining it. It's like, look, all of this stuff working individually is amazing, but they put it all together. They put it on the Switch. It works consistently, and it interacts with each other. So you can build this thing, make it move, and then recall it. So it's all being recorded. You can ascend through it. All of these things are interacting with each other in ways that would have been impressive had it just been one thing on a system 10 times the strength of the Switch.
Yeah, I think I know which video you're talking about. That guy explained it so well. He literally said, like, even one of these 4 or 5 things that you can do in this game would have been impressive as just a single mechanic where the whole game is built around. But putting them all together in one game and having them interact and work so well, that's just great. On the Switch, no less, on a system that's not even supposed to be able to run this. It's but actually that's one more thing that I wanted to address real quick. Because I don't know how you guys feel about that. When people started complaining about the graphics, what did you guys think of that?
So I think any real complaint about the graphics is more so, I guess, the Switch's hardware.
Yeah, of course.
I think
Yeah.
the game still looks fine. I think
Oh,
it
yeah.
looks good because, like, I guess it's kind of like Breath of the Wild, where I think, man, can't wait to see how this runs elsewhere. You get for the high quality cinematic footage for the videos. I think it's an over exaggeration. Like, if you want to see something that it definitely does not look very good, look at recent Pokemon releases. There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Look at Scarlet and Violet. It's
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
I didn't mind. I don't mind Legends. I didn't mind Legends Arceus too much, but it.
Well, the reason I'm asking this is because, do you think it's fair criticism?
The gameplay's so fun. It's so good. Like,
I think
graphics
that it
do-
looks exactly like Breath of the Wild. Maybe a little bit better, but Elden Ring had the same criticism. Like, I don't know if you guys were aware of that, but when Elden Ring was showcased and you had the trailers and all and the movement, you could say, oh, they're reusing the animations, they're reusing all of this stuff. Like they're using a lot of the attack patterns.
Yes.
The backstab animation is the same. The attack animation is the same. Like, this is ridiculous. It's DLC. It's Dark Souls 3.5. It's literally the exact same complaints that they had for Breath of the Wild. And the problem is, um, yeah, but like, are we really going to ignore all the other stuff okay, yes, I think it's valid criticisms. The graphics don't look different than Breath of the Wild, and a different art style or a different graphics, improved graphics could have helped differentiate between, you know, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. And I think it's time Nintendo makes a new console. I am getting tired of the low power of the Switch and using the low power of the Switch as an excuse for their games
Thank
looking the
you.
way that they are. Um, but it's really hard for me to say that I really want better graphics for Tears of the Kingdom when that would absolutely have to come at the cost of some of the stuff that we got. Like the development time would have had to be spent on graphics and improving its appearance, um, instead of Ultra, instead of Fuse, instead of Recall. And I don't think I'd be willing to sacrifice anything that we got for improved visuals.
The issue isn't like the criticism, it's how much people exaggerate its like its relation to the game's score and how good it is.
Hmm.
It's just like they focus so much on the graphics that they of like Tears of the Kingdom that they think it has the same like weight as these abilities. And yeah, Tears of the Kingdom looks like Breath of the Wild, but I think Breath of the Wild still looks really good. So
Yeah.
I mean, I can get how it might feel a bit repetitive to have the same thing, but don't fix what isn't broken. But obviously, I hope that they don't have like a third game. It's like, oh yeah, here's the third game to the trilogy. Same Hyrule. It's like, oh no, let's move on. Let's see the next Zelda project. Let's see a different approach, a different look to it. So
Yeah, I feel. I honestly think in many ways it is valid criticism. I don't think if you were given the chance or given the option, would you rather have, because obviously hardware is a different team of people working on that. It's not like the Zelda team is going to be working on the Switch 2 or the Switch successor. But let's say, for example, they would have been working on a Switch 2 for the last 5, 6 years, and it would have had a better graphics chip, a better CPU, because I think it's especially the CPU is just the biggest problem with this. And it's impressive. Yeah, it's impressive, very impressive what they've been able to do with this game. The seamless transitions, everything, the way this game looks compared to the Pokemon games, it's night and day. It's a huge improvement. So I don't think, obviously, I don't agree with people who hone into the whole graphics issue too much and just say, "Oh, it's a trash game because it looks like a PS2 game." Like, have you played PS2? When was the last time you've played PS2? This is not PS2 quality, okay? It just like Xbox 360 maybe. Okay, that's fair. You can say that, I guess. Maybe Xbox One even. I'm not too sure. I'm not super knowledgeable about hardware in general. But if you would have been given the option, would you have rather had this game on a better system? Of
yeah,
course you would
yeah.
have.
If
Of
it was
course
like
you
a
would.
better, because it's not just about like the graphical improvement. Because without the Switch, you'd think, okay, well, is it going to affect the performance? But yeah, if we immediately suggest that there would be like a new Switch upgrade, yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I
Because
think in that
because
regard,
I also think like we need an upgrade to the Switch. Like I remember playing Age of Calamity and thinking, okay, this definitely means that we need like a Switch upgrade. This game feels like it really struggles on the Switch.
it
Like
does.
everywhere.
Yeah. So I think it's totally valid to say I'm taking, let's say, zero point 0.2 or zero point 0.3 points off of the total score because it's it just looks dated in a lot of ways. In ways that other Zelda games have not actually. The jittering of the shadows, the jittering of the general world. I didn't see that in Wind Waker, for example, which granted is a slightly different art style, but if you're not able to make it work, then fix it in a different way. I was kind of bothered by some graphical issues where I was like, man, it would be so cool if this was just 60 FPS, just ray tracing or whatever, just a little bit more crisp. And I think it's totally fair to punish Nintendo for that, because if we're just going to go along with it and just accept everything Nintendo does, they're not going to change. And Nintendo needs to hear the criticism up until a point. Like when the Switch first came out, fine. Games looked the way they did, but you could play them on an airplane. You could play them in the car, and it was amazing. But we're 6 years down the line now, and I do feel like Nintendo needs to hear certain criticisms, and one of them is the graphics and the storytelling, the world building could have been better too. If we don't voice those, if we're just going to pretend like this is a perfect game, we're not going to see improvements. It's up to us as consumers to voice our criticisms, and some of them are more than rational. Just because you love this game, I love it too. I've been playing it every day since it came out. Like I was playing it 2 hours before this podcast started. I love it in so many different ways, but I do like.
It's
usually
just time,
use my
man. It's just time for a new console.
I wish Nintendo would for once like stop this obsession with trying to make like a console that has like a catch to it.
Yeah.
And I want to see them sit down and see what happens when they do like just make like
just
a powerhouse
normal
one.
console.
Yeah,
Just make a normal console.
Yeah, because it's been established that a big reason it's not really like these gimmicks. I mean, the Switch is different obviously because it actually had a really good concept, but
yes,
it's been established that they buy it for all the exclusive games. So imagine if they just sat down, actually try to make a console that was just about like the power and performance, and then they had those exclusive games on it. Like that would be insane. But especially with the Switch now, it feels very unlikely they're going to do that because the Switch, and its appeal is something that like why would you get rid of it once you have it? Because you can play games on the go now. But even things like the Steam Deck. It just shows, it just shows how Nintendo can do this. They absolutely could find a way.
Didn't they also announce on the latest PlayStation showcase a new thing with controllers on the side?
I saw images and I thought it was like a leak or some dumb fake thing, and then I saw people talk about it on Twitter. I'm like, wait, that's real? What?
It was so funny. It's such a bad idea. Did
you see the
Ultra
the
hand glue?
Shared? Yeah.
That's the one. That's how I found out about it. The Ultra Hand meme was the one that clued me in on it. But yeah,
that was so good.
But that's typical PlayStation. They're usually kind of late to the party, and when they do, it's like, really, guys, come on. This is just too much.
I have to assume the reason Nintendo doesn't make a straight up console is that they don't think they can compete with like, the whatever decades of experience of straight up consoles that PlayStation and Xbox have.
No, they totally like.
They have such their games slap so hard.
Okay, if they were able to get the amount of performance and stuff they did out of the Switch when like it released, because people were already impressive about that, they absolutely could get that performance and stuff out of one that they're actually dedicating to like power and if they could do it with the Switch, they could do it with the regular console. I argue that the Switch is significantly harder to pull off that sort of concept.
But anyway, let me get to the thing I actually want to talk about the most. Let's talk about my criticism with the story. Like it feels like we've been just criticizing the story, but no, I haven't even begun to criticize the story. I haven't even started to even criticize the story.
I had a feeling this would come up because I listened to your podcast talking about stuff.
Let me start with the big one.
I was talking to Don about it as well. So
let me talk. Let's just start with the big one. Let's just go straight in to the ending.
Okay.
Yes.
I hate the ending. I hate the ending so much. No, actually, look, I have really weird mixed feelings about the ending because there's a lot about the ending that I really like. I like the fight with Ganondorf. I like how it plays out. I like the actual mechanics of the fight and how some of his attacks will permanently take your hearts out. Not even Gloom take it
It's
away.
so cool.
Like
When I saw that, I was like, "What?"
take them away the way he did in the beginning of the game. Like that was super amazing. Like I thought that was incredible. And
By the time Link finishes, imagine if like he didn't get the hearts back. He's like, "Okay, so Zelda, like we can be together, but I only have one heart left. So
you
like,
got to be
just
gentle with me.
don't let me like get hit by a rock or something because I'm dead."
um, so that
It's one of the best boss fights
Ever.
in the series.
ever.
For me, for
Yeah.
sure.
For real. And then the thing with the dragons, I really like the parallels. Like he's so desperate to win, he eats his secret stone just like Zelda does. He does a similar cutscene to Zelda. It's close up on his eyes. It's an incredible scene. And then you're fighting in the air with Zelda helping you, and you finally realize what the parallel is between it and the two dragons chasing each other. It's a yin and yang symbol with Link and Zelda. Well, with Dragon Ganondorf and Dragon Zelda chasing after each other in this kind of yin yang order chaos dynamic. And it's like, oh, it's so wonderful. The music and the spectacle. I love spectacle fights. Like in Elden Ring, some of my favorite fights are Rykard and Radahn.
Rykard, yeah.
It's
Such an underrated boss.
It's amazing. The music was good, and the Zelda Dragon AI is so good at catching you. Like I could try and get her to miss, and she goes right underneath you and catches you. It was awesome. I really liked the whole thing.
And it didn't even have to be difficult. It was just for the spectacle of it. Like the difficult part,
Came before.
luckily, was before that. Yeah, came before.
Okay.
So yeah,
So all of that was great. All of that is awesome. My issue is that Zelda turns back into a human, and everything is nice, and there's no cost paid at all. And look, people will be like, "Oh, it's a Zelda game. Kids have to like it." It's like, no, that's not how this goes. You have to pay a. I didn't write the script. Okay, I didn't write the part where it said, "Oh, okay." Let me put it this way. They were building up. They wanted to make her sacrifice meaningful. They wanted to. They're showing through the memory cutscenes what she's going through. She wants to help Link. She takes the secret stone. She knows that it permanently changes her. Those are her words. Those are the warning that she got. They said those things to build up the meaning of her sacrificing herself. Like they wanted it to be important. And then it turns out that Raru and Sonia's ghost can just unturn her, and that's it. There's no cost. And not only that, she's not even traumatized from it. Like she doesn't even remember the millennia that she spent as a dragon. She's like, oh, I just don't really remember that very much. It's zero cost. Not any mental cost, no physical cost, no anything. And like I get that Zelda doesn't die in these games. Like I get that Zelda they did the same thing with Twilight Princess. But in all of the other Zelda games, they did specialize a lot in letting the player feel a sense of loss or something is lost even in the victories. So in Twilight Princess, yeah, Zelda is there and they didn't permanently kill her, even though it seemed like they would. But Midna has to go away. Midna leaves at the end of the game and shatters the mirror behind her. So there's the sense of loss. In Ocarina of Time, Zelda sends you back in time, permanently sending you away from that version of her, sending you back in time. The loss of your innocence, the loss of your childhood. You're a child again, but you can't relive your childhood because you've lost your you've seen too much. Navi leaves at the end of it, and Link chases after her in Majora's Mask, I suppose. Even in Ocarina, they do that a lot. When you leave Kokiri Forest and Saria's there on the bridge, and she's like, I knew you were different from us. I knew that you were always going to leave. There's this sense of loss that something important is being sacrificed to pursue your destiny out in Hyrule. There's lots of little moments like that. I'm assuming you guys think that the sages are dead, right? In Ocarina?
yeah. In a way, like they've transcended.
Yes. Like
their
even if
mortal
they're not like dead,
realm.
they can't stop being sages, right?
Yeah, I've never really looked into the topic too much, but I know that that's recurring point of debate.
Okay, well,
Well, it's just that Zelda has always embraced these more mature,
yes,
like there's always a cost in some. Even the Wind Waker, which is arguably one of the cutesiest Zelda games ever made, like that ending is bittersweet in so many ways. And it's such a mature ending to the adventure where you're like, man, that's heavy. That's really heavy. Yeah, it's
Also,
like
that the
this.
first time you go into Hyrule Castle as well, it's in like the sudden tone shift is one of like my most memorable moments, because it when you that first part of the Hyrule Castle thing, when you enter it, it's so eerie.
It's very eerie,
It's
yeah.
so eerie.
But also just the way they set it up at the end. It's like me, Ganondorf, this kingdom. We are relics of a futureless. Like there's no future here.
yeah, we're all clinging to the
It's
past.
we're all clinging to the past, and it's time we finally let the new generation have a chance to, have an actual future. And they could have easily done the easy way, just the Teletubby ending, and just wish for Hyrule to be restored and rainbows everywhere and everyone's happy. But no, they dare to go there, and the whole kingdom just sinks below the ocean for good. And it's the end. And with Tears of the Kingdom, it, ah, I also really hated it.
Okay.
It was,
Okay.
I just did not like the fact that there was basically no casualties, because
None of the sages lose. Nobody dies at all. No sacrifice at all. Here's another problem. I mentioned the yin yang symbol. So like the dragons chasing each other's tail. At the very end, you see Dragon Ganondorf, Dragon Zelda. You see what they were going for.
mm-hmm.
In these themes, when you have order and chaos, order often represents civilization and authority, and that's a lot of the times why there's princesses in these kinds of story. Like the princess represents a good authority, like a good civilization, and the forces of chaos that are trying to destroy it. And in the preservation of authority requires sacrifice. It just does. It just does. The preservation of order requires continual, endless sacrifices, and Zelda has always understood that on some level. Like the way that the sages work has always kind of understood that, because the sages are kind of doing sacrificial things. Even in Breath of the Wild, they kind of got that, because the monks are like hundreds of well, not hundreds, like 100 living Buddha monks that to give you tiny incremental power sources to the hero. Like they understand what it's supposed to be to sacrifice for the preservation of something. And in even Wind Waker, like you said, the most cutesy one, those sages were kind of tragic too, because they didn't want to be sages. They had other lives to live, and they reluctantly become sages to embrace their destiny and help the hero. Even though they're sacrificing, a lot of their. I don't think they stop being sages at the end, right? They continue being sages.
No.
Yeah.
They sacrifice parts of their personality to become sages.
So it's bothersome when this is the game that doesn't do that, when they themselves set up the whole thing. I didn't write that the change was permanent and that Zelda would be a dragon. They did that. They said that in their dialogue with each other. They're the ones that were talking about that sacrifice, and then they just take it away from me. It's very irritating.
Okay, so when I first played it, I had a feeling that they would change Zelda back. It just felt like that they would find a way to, undo that sacrifice. And I absolutely do agree that if they did do that, it would make that sacrifice way more meaningful. Because like having her go back, it does, take away that a lot of that impact. But honestly, I'm so emotionally attached to this character that when I saw it, I'm like, okay, I get that it might not have as much of an impact, but I really do want to see Zelda like go back to being, not a dragon, because this character's been through way too much. All right, she held back Calamity Ganon for 100 years, finally reunites with Link, and then all of a sudden she has to wait even longer time and become a dragon. So like I totally understand that, like story wise it ruins that like sacrifice and I guess the resolve she had. But I was still like I get it, but I do want to see her turn back into a human. So like I kind of disagree about that. I guess you could say I'm a bit mixed on it. I think my problem is how she turns back
The
into
power of friendship.
yeah, well, yeah, because they all of a sudden Sonya and Raru's spirits appear. It's like, wait, what? Okay, so Sonya's here as well, I guess. And then they just
Yeah,
like
how?
they channel the power through Link's arm or something, and I guess like used recall or something. I have no idea. So that's the issue. That's my issue. I'm fine with our turn. I'm
It's the
fine with the
reasoning.
happy ending.
It's the reasoning.
It's how. Yes, it's how exactly. So because I still think it doesn't, I guess, fully take away that sacrifice. Because Zelda still had to endure all that time.
Yeah, but she doesn't remember it.
Obviously, she does. Well, yeah, I know. Obviously, yeah. So she doesn't
also
remember it. So maybe
kind of
have her. They should have
weird.
had her turn into a human, find a different reason for it, and maybe have her remember some things.
I would have
So
maybe even made
do
her
that-
lose her memory or something, or like
Right.
some kind of cost,
That-
to
Oh man, that would, imagine if she wakes up and Link sees her. Link's so happy, and then the first thing she says is, "Who are you?"
yeah. Yeah.
like that.
Look, okay.
So I absolutely agree with that. We should have had it through.
Let me explain why this is such so bothersome to me. It's because
Okay.
I actually think it's awesome. Like I actually like a lot of the ending. Specifically, okay, look, you know, she she stops being a dragon, she's falling, Link is like chasing after her in
That's such a cool sequence. I love it.
It's
It was so cool.
It's so good. Excuse me. And then you know he reaches his hand out to grab her, and it's paralleling the first time in the beginning of the game where he can't reach her. He doesn't. She falls. This time he grabs her hand and he actually reaches her. They make a whole big thing about it, and then they end up together at the end. Fine. Look, fine. But the sacrifice, the impact that it had initially was so impressive to me because like you don't know where to go find Zelda. That's the premise of the early game. Go see where she is, and then you're looking at tears, you're finding tears, and then you realize you find that one tear. Like there's one tear in the Elden region where it makes it very clear that she's the dragon before you get any of the other ones even. And if you find that tear, she spawns like right above you. And she's just there. And so you realize that she's the dragon. You realize, oh my God, she was there before the title screen. She was there at the beginning in the Sky Islands flying around. She's like, Link, you have to find me. You have to find where I am because I'm not going to be able to find you. And so she's protecting the master. So you see her above her. It's like, it's emotional. It's like, oh, that's amazing. That's great. It hits you in your gut.
It's the best part of the story, in my opinion.
Yes, it's
Because nobody guessed it.
It's so good.
No one pre-release thought that would be the case. Like nobody thought that was where this was going, and it shows real courage in storytelling to do something like that especially in a Zelda game. I get that Zelda was not going to permanently die or stay a dragon, because they've never done anything like that. Zelda has never died, but they didn't replace that with anything. Like I mentioned, all these other, there are moments of feelings of loss. Like something was sacrificed for the preservation of the order. Something was lost. Something that was important. I mentioned Ocarina sends Link back in time. Wind Waker with all of Hyrule going back underground because it's time for that. It's two old men in a kingdom clinging to their past. Nothing like that happened in Tears of the Kingdom. There's no loss. There's no sacrifice. None of the sages die. The sages aren't even really sages in the sense that they were in previous games. They're not parts of their lives aren't sacrificed for this. It's all good with no cons.
And before people say things like, well, Raru and Sonya, and
They were dead
but
to the start of the
that's
game.
exactly. That was like, even if they would have survived, they would have been dead by that point. 'Cause it's like
They
tens of
apparently
thousands of years ago.
and also they were still alive enough apparently to turn Zelda back into a human. So
Well, that's one of my biggest gripes with the story. Besides I think it would have been more poetic to have Zelda stay a dragon at the end, and just imagine the impact that would have had if at the end you save everyone and everything, but then it cuts to Zelda
Flying away
as a dragon, flying away into the sunset, and it's like, wow. Like, I get that it's going to be very difficult to make a sequel because it's the end of the bloodline of Zelda in a way, but they could solve that in some way, I guess.
It's not like they care about that anymore. Considering
also that, yeah. But
I totally think that it should have been replaced with something else. I think that would have
just
been
a little loss, a little bit. Like
that's what I could get behind that idea.
It's just
that
seasoning, you know. It's like you have this great dish in front of you. This amazing dish, but it's got no flavor. It's got no seasoning. You have to flavor my joy and Link and Zelda's happiness and them being together. You have to flavor it with some sorrow. Like you have to flavor it with some feelings of loss, some apprehension.
Sprinkling, yes, this loss is gonna go well. Delicious.
Yeah, it's but in general, that's the problem with the story, is because it was written in a non-linear way. They kind of want you to go anywhere and pick up on clues before you're supposed to get them. Like, I actually watched your playthrough, Will, and I saw that you already found Minoru before you're supposed to.
I was looking they're talking for like, where's the final sage? Just another sage. Just like, yeah, I mean, I found this mask and just haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah, but if you don't, then there's this whole side quest before that, and I needed some footage of that, but you just skipped that. Like, you completely skipped that part. So I was like, shoot. Like, it was a very specific piece of dialogue which I wanted for my video, but it wasn't in yours.
It was a great side quest. Man. I really liked that quest with the Thunderhead.
Yeah. The music on the Thunderhead Island was also really good. Very ethereal. But can I just ask you?
Hold on. I can't get over the way the robot runs. I made jokes about it in my stream. I'm like, all right, we're gonna Naruto run.
Naruto run, yeah.
So I remember beating the construct that we fight in that cool little boxing fight, and I'm like, all right, it's time, guys, to go up to the tier. But before we do that, we have to make sure we Naruto run up to the tier. And I'm just like running up the road. All seriousness is just taken away.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah,
it's really funny. But can I just ask you guys something? Because I'm at a loss when it comes to my reasoning for it. Why the heck did Raru just disappear after the tutorial? If he can clearly show up. He showed up at the end. Whereas when the champions and King Rome disappeared at the end of Breath of the Wild, or the true ending, it was gone. It was over. They moved on officially to the next life, or whatever heaven is supposed to be. But here, he's just like, well, you've done what you need to do, and see you later. And he just turns into particles and disappears. And I'm like, in hindsight, there is so much that you could have told us that would have helped immensely in our quest to save the kingdom. You could have told us that your wife was killed by a puppet Zelda, which would have already clued us into the fact that if we see Zelda, oh, maybe that's not really Zelda. Like, that's dangerous,
Well, to be fair, it wasn't puppet Zelda. It was Ganondorf who just kind of like punched Sonya in the back.
Yeah, but it leads into that because he disguised himself or created a puppet Zelda. Like, there's so much information that he knew that he could have told Link in that moment.
He doesn't even
And
tell you
that's-
that he's the king. He doesn't even tell you he's the king of.
That's my problem. That's my problem in general with the memories, because all the time I was that's the big issue for me, primarily for the story. It's like it follows that trope of like people not communicating things at all.
Oh my god, yes.
Zelda knows so much, and she does an awful lot of not talking.
It's
so
crazy.
It's so. I was talking again. I was talking to Don about this, but obviously the first thing is Ganondorf, Calamity Ganon. She mentions, oh, that name sounds familiar, and she mentions how there's a dark presence or something emanating from him, dark intentions, and that's as far as they go. And it's like, okay, well, maybe they didn't want to assume that the corpse was Ganondorf. It's like, okay, fine, but let's talk about how she got into the past to begin with. A big part of it is her wanting to return to her own time, and she does, between two memories, obviously tell them some information about her, because the memory 2 talks about how she's like the daughter of King Rome or whatever, and all she says is, I have to get back to my time, something terrible is happening, and that's the end of that topic. That's all.
Yeah, that's
and
the
also
end.
and there's no question, Rauru doesn't even think, even though he's the person who establishes this kingdom, you think he would be a bit curious as to what terrible things happening in her time, and also the fact that she has a tear. And I get how maybe they would just assumed that because she was descended, she like inherited a tear. But you think he'd at least question, like, oh, how'd you get that or something? And the first time she even mentions finding a man underground is literally near the end, after Sonya died.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so even assuming that they thought that the tear was something that she inherited, that the reason Zelda didn't say it was because she didn't want to assume that the corpse was Ganondorf, why is it only now that she's mentioning how what events led up to her going to the past, finding a tear, and going back in time? It's like you know why? Because that information alone would have been enough to give them hints about stuff. Because where was the tear? It's like, oh, how do you find the tear? Oh, well, it was on the right hand, the back of the right hand of some person holding down a corpse. Oh, hey, you have a tear on your back of your right hand. Like, just that alone would have been a lot. So it's not just the issue that they can't assume that the corpse is Ganondorf. It's just the events that led to her going in the past. That's the big issue. Right?
The Tears of the Kingdom haters are gonna have a field day with this stream.
I know, but
I have a lot of.
But again, it's all story related.
It's all story related.
Yeah.
Again, the gameplay is amazing. It's also very good, but the story just doesn't make sense.
There are some things I can get her not, because I know that she would be in shock, and she would, because she's in this new world, she's trying to understand it. I can get that sort of criticism. I can understand, for to explain things such as why she doesn't bring up that the corpse name drops Rauru. I can get her not paying attention to that because she's just so in shock of everything that's going on. But it's just the fact that she doesn't even, she clearly remembers the events, because she later on talks about exploring underground, finding a corpse and stuff. It just, why was that never brought up at all? Yet we had two memories, a point between two memories where she's clearly explaining stuff that happens, and you think that if she was so worried about getting back to the past, that and the fact that Minoru, when they go talk to her, she's trying to figure it out because she's very knowledgeable. You think there'd be a point where, since they don't know how to get back to the past, it's like, okay, well, what happened which brought you to the past? You think they'd ask her about that, but no, they don't. They don't care about how she got. Like,
not at all. Not a single. There's no one who asks her about. Like, she only says something terrible is happening in my time, in my era,
like, oh,
and they're not like, okay, tell me about what happened. Well, we went underground and we found this corpse, and he had long red hair or whatever, and like you said, I can get behind the idea that she's in shock and she might not remember him name dropping Rauru. But still, like the tear, all the things that could link that whole situation to what's happening or what's transpiring.
Are you sure
like
it's reasonable for her not to not remember? Because from her perspective, she just name dropped Nararu, and then she fell, and then the next thing she wakes up, she sees Raru. Like that's the next. Like I think that's the next thing that happens, right? She's in a field, and Raru and Sonia come up to her, and they introduce themselves after she says that she's the princess of Hyrule. Because
True, it's again like, making an excuse.
Yeah.
Because I would remember because he specifically says like, "Was that the sword that seals the darkness?"
yeah,
And you must be Zelda. You must be Link. Raru placed his faith in you, and then shit. Yeah, then shit goes down, and it just doesn't make any sense. The same thing with Minoru. Minoru was inside the Pura pad all this time, and she doesn't leave a message. She doesn't say anything. And at first I thought, well, maybe she just didn't have the ability to wake up, or until she had that robot body, you know, or until you find the mask. But no,
She's talking to you.
Well, in one of the memories, quote unquote, where she talks to you, she says, "I initially intended to wake up much earlier." So I was like, okay, so you did have the ability to wake up earlier, but you just didn't.
what did she say? Did she give an explanation why she didn't wake up much earlier to help you?
No,
I was gonna,
she
and then that's the end of the sentence.
watch the cutscene again. She literally gives no explanation as to why. She just says, "I initially wanted to wake up earlier," and then she just switches topic. Then she just switches topic to something else, and then it never gets brought up again. And I'm like, you could have
There's gotta be an explanation for that, or something that they assume that we figured out.
But again, then we have to make up excuses for the story writers. Whereas if they did a good job with the story writing, we wouldn't need to find excuses. And
you brought up. Sorry, go ahead.
Like, I'm not talking about the stuff that we saw in Breath of the Wild, where it was like, okay, this whole calamity happened, everybody died, and the rest is kind of left ambiguous. You're kind of just supposed to look at the ruins and how things could have transpired, because nobody knows. Most of Hyrule died, so there's no one to tell the story. But in this case, it's just very basic communication that characters just refuse to give you, and it's largely in part because we're able to collect all this information on our own, separate from the main story. So you collect a tear, you get the memory, and you see certain things happening there, but Link doesn't use that information in the actual story.
And he doesn't tell anybody about it.
Yeah.
He doesn't tell anyone.
You asked about how weird it was that Raru just disappears and he comes back later on. First off, it would be really cool if he was just like a companion character.
I would love that.
You could that would be so.
Because he doesn't know where Zelda is either. He was already dead by the time that Zelda turned into a dragon. So he wouldn't know either. It would be great to have him speculate and talk.
That is true. Yeah, that would be very interesting. But anyways, the thing I'm more curious about that I'm still trying to understand is, all this time we thought maybe Zelda had used the power of recall to send the Master Sword back. But Zelda walks back to the Temple of Time, and that glow is just there.
Yes.
It's just there. I don't know how who put that there, but she literally, that's before anything was planned out. She just walks to the Temple of Time, sees this glow, walks toward it. I guess then maybe like this Master Sword speaks to her or something. She just never mind. The Master Sword speaks to Link, puts it through, and then as she walks up, she gets the Master Sword. And it's like, wait, so who put that golden glow there? What? Who?
Yeah, it didn't seem to be planned at all. Like it just happened.
It's just there. It's just there.
Who created a rift between these two timelines?
But again, it's so many things that it's like we're expected to come up. It's like a timeline, you know? Well, it's like, we want to see. We like to see what players come up with.
I like before the stream started, I said like even if this is supposed to be like just a complete reboot, or it takes place still like thousands and thousands of years after the original timeline, because there are still little references to the old games, especially the outfits and stuff, where it's like, oh, this cap was once worn by a hero from an ancient time, you know.
Or the goddess statues.
I'm not the biggest timeline guy in general. You have to acknowledge its existence, and you have to kind of go along with it, which is fine. But even if this is supposed to be a reboot or anything else, just I can live with that. I can totally live with the fact that this game doesn't really connect to the other games at all, or very badly. But at least make it connect to Breath of the Wild in a cohesive way, and they just didn't. They just didn't do that at all. There's flat out retcons in there that just don't make sense, and you're not rewarded for your knowledge of Breath of the Wild.
What's an example of one of the retcons from?
I know where this is going.
Well, for example, the eighth heroine, or the 8 heroine statues.
I haven't done that quest yet, but like before he continues, I talked to him about it, and I was like, man, I was on the chat, I was streaming, and then I find out there's a passage. I'm like getting all excited. I go in, and then I get a freaking Tingle outfit. And I was like, are you kidding me? And my chat was like, haha, troll. And then Don was like, oh no, there's a quest with it. I'm like, oh cool, awesome, I haven't done it yet. He's like, yeah, it's very underwhelming. I'm like, oh.
The answer is not satisfactory.
Like,
Okay,
that
no,
Mr.
actually,
Incredible meme.
I'm actually curious about that, because we talked about the 8th Heroine quest last stream, and
Yes.
I didn't do it yet. I'm gonna do it, but I'm fine with being spoiled about that specific quest, because I really want to know, because I saw your 8th Heroine video and I was really interested. I thought maybe you were onto something, and that would be important in this game. What ended up happening with the 8th Heroine quest?
Okay, so
It was
I'm not
just some dude.
just to be clear, I'm not salty about the fact that I was wrong. In fact, I was kind of expecting to be wrong in a certain way, because I've done previous predictions and talked to other people, and it kind of changed over time because you get more information about the sequel and blah blah blah. So I never put like my money on it, but I did at least feel like like you said, maybe I was onto something. But the answer that we actually ended up getting has nothing to do with anything I talked about before. It didn't have anything to do with the sages at all.
Well, what were
It
they
was
then?
just the 7 statues were just 7 Gerudo women, Gerudo warriors, who once, like a ambiguous amount of time ago, like they don't explain when, some kind of monster attacked Gerudo Town, and they bonded together to fight it off. And then some dude just showed up, a male hero showed up and helped them, I don't know, find their synergy. And then they defeated this monster. But because he was a guy, they couldn't memorialize him like they would. And it's like, well, he couldn't get into, like, maybe he's a past hero or something. I don't know. And that's all fine, but then why did you put 7 sages in Gerudo script on those statues in Breath of the Wild? Did you just forget that you put that there?
That seems like a retcon, just to...
I was gonna say, like, a lot of quite a few mysteries. It's not just the timeline that feels retcon. It does feel like parts of Breath of the Wild were retcon. Even I see comments saying, "Oh man, we were all just assuming that like the barbarian armor was the warlike tribe was the Zonai," but like they're not, because we see the Zonai in Tears of the Kingdom and their advanced technology, and I guess they have all their own outfits and stuff. But it's like, okay, so who was this tribe? Because we still know that this tribe resided in Faron in a place called Zonai Ruins that like has relevant. So like it clearly feels like this stuff's connected to the Zonai, this armor set and this tribe mentioned, and like these 3 armor sets are in the 3 Zonai mazes.
Yeah.
So it feels like it feels more like it was just they've retconned stuff.
And now the Phantom Phantom Ganon armor is in the mazes instead, and it's like, wait, what?
Oh wow.
How
Yeah,
does that?
I
How
haven't
does
done
that work?
that
Okay,
yet.
that's just not right. I think the putting of the DLC armor, and the DLC armor is still not upgradable, just like it was in Breath of the Wild, and seems like just an oversight.
Why
Just
why
like an
isn't the
Yes.
archaic
up-
tunic and
upgradable.
set
Yeah.
upgradable?
Yeah, I want to wear that throughout
Yeah.
the whole game. That thing's cool.
They advertised they advertised it so hard with the like I saw that, I'm thinking, what?
Well, it's supposed to be like the old shirt and trousers from the
I get
previous
it,
game,
but
I
like,
guess.
why can't you just make every set upgradable? It's just upgrading that gives you less defense and is not as optimal.
Well, I agree with Ratatosker. It's actually kind of lazy how they just put all the bulk of the outfits are just the DLC outfits from the previous game.
It's
previous game.
ridiculous. It's ridiculous that and it's not just that. It's even lazier that they seem. I don't think they're not upgradable for any design purposes. I don't think there's a design reason why those armor sets are not upgradable. They're not inherently better a lot of the times than a lot of the stuff that's already in the game. No, those armor
No.
sets are non-upgradable because they were non-upgradable in Breath of the Wild, and in Breath of the Wild they were DLC items. That's why they're not upgradable, because they just took the DLC items and scattered them across kind of important places. You know, the Phantom Ganon armor in the labyrinth, that has no lore implications. I'm positive. It has nothing to do with the lore that the Zonai had Phantom Ganon parts. No, it's just they needed a reward at the end of these cool labyrinths, and I'm very disappointed in the actual reward. It's this non-lore relevant Phantom Ganon pieces of armor that are not upgradable and are just DLC items for previous games, when the labyrinths are so cool. Like, the actual labyrinths are cool. You do the labyrinth in the ground, and then you do the labyrinth in the sky, and then you do the bottom part, and it coincides with the 3 parts of the Triforce. And then you give me the shit reward. No.
One of my favorite outfits in Breath of the Wild was the Royal Guards outfit. I think it's really cool. But then when I saw you couldn't upgrade it, I'm like, wow, well, that kind of kills the mood.
Yeah,
I will say though, I haven't yet done I've only done the surface labyrinth. I haven't gotten to the sky or the underground ones yet.
Well,
So,
I mean,
I'm
the reward
interested.
is not everything, of course, but lore-wise, it just doesn't make sense. I don't even.
I think we
I
can
don't even
safely
care that-
ignore it.
Have you guys seen the reward for all the Korok seeds?
Oh
Is
yes.
it the same thing?
Never changes. Nope.
Okay.
Yep.
It's the same. It's the same. Yeah. Yeah.
It's has to get.
It's like,
Again-
well, some things never change. I
It's a
like how
funny troll.
I like how certain things they've chosen not to retcon. But you know, the heroines, it's like, we got to make sure that we still get the poop. That's got to stay consistent. That's important to the timeline.
What was the thing
But
about
Of
Tingle?
course, Hesto doesn't recognize you, even though you did all that stuff for him in the previous game. I'm like,
Never happened.
At least,
Retconned.
yeah, at least acknowledge my existence and all the stuff we did.
Was there anything important with the Tingle outfit? Like, you said that that was related to the 7 heroines. Is it not?
It's just that when I went in, I found a Tingle, the head part of the Tingle outfit in the 8th heroine cave. I don't know where the other ones are.
Was Tingle the 8th heroine?
That was a joke. That was a joke because people.
That was the joke, yeah.
Unironically, everything eventually becomes Tingle in a theory.
Right.
It's like, oh, Tingle is this, Tingle is that. So
Yeah.
it's
But
kind
the
of
other
funny as a joke.
parts-
Like, haha, Tingle's the hero who helped them.
But the
Yeah,
other
no.
parts of the outfit, they're found in completely different
Okay, well,
places.
Yeah.
So
Whatever.
that-
Doesn't make any sense, but fine.
Yeah, but because they already did this in Breath of the Wild, it just feels cheap, you know? If they didn't go for all the DLC outfits and just gave you new things, like completely new things, maybe even from the older games, like little callbacks, I would have been fine with that. But again, lore-wise, it just doesn't make sense because now we didn't... Like, they imply that we never collected these things from the DLC in Breath of the Wild. But then the Champion's Ballad was supposed to be canon because we learn a lot of new lore from the Champion's Ballad. So I
And
don't
have the
know. It
picture.
just feels.
And we have the picture.
And we get the picture. Yeah. So it's very weird how they kind of are so selective about what's canon and not canon. And now Misko the Great Bandit is this fashion guy who he found all these outfits and he hid them in places that even inside the depths, which nobody knew existed back then in Breath of the Wild, but now they're in new areas, new locations. It doesn't work at all. No matter what kind of excuse you come up with, it doesn't really work. And man.
Well, actually, this brings up to my next thing. Earlier, you mentioned this, Monster Maze, but let me ask you formally. We talked about this last time. Is everybody here under the assumption that we're in a new continuity or in a different timeline, or this is a reboot of some kind? Because you seem to think that's still Monster Maze.
I'm not too sure. They could somehow justify it where it does fit into the other timeline, where like maybe Hyrule was destroyed and refounded, and that's why they are called the first king and queen of Hyrule. But it doesn't. It all again, we have to make excuses to make it work. So maybe it is a reboot. Maybe the Zelda creators will come out and just say, we just wanted to start fresh. The timeline has always been something that we've struggled with, and we just wanted to start over in a new way, with a new continuity. Call it a fourth timeline or whatever. This is how we prefer it. Fine, I'm good with that.
What about you, Nintendo Black Crisis?
I think it might just be a reboot. I know there are some possible explanations, like the one Don said. It's funny because like a super long time ago, I had made a video, a 2-part series talking about like Breath of the Wild's involvement with the Zelda timeline, and in the second part, a big part of that was trying to explain how perhaps having Breath of the Wild at the end of all timelines meant they could like have a new timeline that starts with Breath of the Wild and then they go from there. And Tears of the Kingdom, it feels like it just further reinforces that idea that it's a soft reboot.
Yeah, but they did say it's at the end of the original timeline in the beginning. I know that's also kind of fan pressure, but at least don't say that.
Yeah, I know.
Don't go away with us. Go all in.
Yes,
I know.
yeah, exactly. Like just own it and just go for it. If that's your intention, don't try to stay in that middle ground. Like I'm a centrist at heart in many ways, but in this thing, I'm like when it comes to this kind of stuff, I'm like just pick a side. Either go timeline or go like we don't care. We're just doing whatever we feel is right.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe to fully understand it, we're gonna have to see what the next Zelda game is they work on. I feel like at that point, if they have even more continuity errors and stuff, it's like okay, they really don't care
know
what they're doing.
They don't care.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to see what, unless the third game is gonna be like a Tears of the Kingdom sequel.
I think it was pretty funny how people were like, they mentioned the word imprisoning war, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, it's actually!"
I was like, "Whoa!"
It's actually in the downfall timeline. We finally got a confirmation. It's just like it's just a term. It's just a term. Just because they call it imprisoning war doesn't mean it's the imprisoning war that we know of.
And I think it's a callback. It's still a callback to the imprisoning war. I'm positive, but that doesn't mean that it's in the Fallen Hero timeline and it's that imprisoning war anymore.
Well, I wasn't even excited about, like, I didn't think, oh yeah, this is timeline confirmed. It's just when I heard imprisoning war, I was like, that's really neat, because from what I remember, there's a war in one Zelda game that's referenced as the imprisoning war, and at the time I remember saying, yeah, so Nintendo made this game really, really thinking about the past games. It's like, yeah, no.
or it's just a term, like imprisoning war. You imprison someone. They could have just as well called it the sealing war or something else, but they chose to go with this term, which is fine. I don't mind that. It doesn't really connect because it cannot possibly be the imprisoning war.
unless
No, it's not possible.
it's not
Unless
the
it's a reboot.
unless it's a reboot and it's just, it's alluding to the imprisoning war, and it's alluding to Ocarina with Ganondorf bowing, it's alluding to Skyward Sword with the Sky Islands, and the civilization in the sky, and it's just alluding to a bunch of stuff, and it's all the games at once, which I don't look. What I've noticed online is that there doesn't seem to be a consensus. People are fighting viciously over what they think this is. A lot of people think that it's a reboot. Every person I've had on my podcast think that this just doesn't make any sense. This doesn't feel right. This doesn't fit. It doesn't. And they'll come up with like, oh, it's so much time has passed that Hyrule got refounded, and Rauru is the new king of Hyrule, new first king of Hyrule. Well, then he's not the first king of Hyrule. Damn it.
No. Then why call him Rauru?
Yeah.
Well, that also makes it even more confusing. Why not give him it? Because by all definition, that means that she should have been called Zelda and not Sonia. that also doesn't really make at least just.
Unless Zelda went back in time and they named all their children after her, and that's where the
that's another thing. It makes me even question, like, in this new timeline, in this game's version of it, are we expected to believe that even like Skyward Sword happened?
Yeah.
Is there a different,
and Skyward Sword would still have to have been first, right?
Yeah, it makes
but then where was the Master Sword in the ancient past where Zelda is? Shouldn't there be a Master Sword in their timeline as well?
Oh my god, there's 3 Master Swords.
Well,
that's what I thought was going to happen.
And the fact that there are 3 dragons named after the 3 golden goddesses, and the lore about eating a stone. So like, obviously a lot of people have already thought about this, and it's like, oh wait, does this mean that at one time these people were human? And like, is that instead the origin of this game's timeline's golden goddesses? Like, I mean, there's a Hylia statue.
Yeah, they mention Hylia by name in several places.
Yeah. So,
well, I'll take it even further. Do we ever get any sense of confirmation that Rauru and Sonia had kids? No.
That's another thing I'm confused about. Because if Zelda has both their powers, it suggests that she's a descendant. But Sonia was killed by Ganondorf. So like,
if she is a descendant, they must have had kids. If she is,
they had to have had kids, and they're just not talked about. Yeah, they were explaining things.
They're not mentioned
because Rauru later on goes into fight and like.
And he essentially dies too. But again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but world building, you have to at least acknowledge that because now we have to make up excuses why that could be possible, because by all accounts, it shouldn't be possible. They could have easily had a little, because there were like these stone tablets, right? With, I think it's like a manifest of a servant of Rauru and Sonia, who recorded some basic history, but none of that really amounts to anything. There's very little explanation in those transcripts.
Is that the Rain Ruins?
No, the other ones. Those flower-shaped islands have like a stone tablet on it with ancient Hylian on it, and they drop down or they stay where they are, and you can take a picture of it, and some guy in Kakariko Village.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I had one that when I landed on it, it went right into the depths.
yeah, exactly. Those tablets, but it doesn't. It
doesn't add anything.
I think that. Yeah, and I saw people come up with excuses. Well, maybe that servant was actually their kid. It's like, well, then they did a poor job explaining that, because they clearly just say they are a servant and not their.
A lot of the information they give us through the ruins in the present is stuff that we already find in the past. There's not much added context.
And that's what I meant by it doesn't do a good job at world building, because you have to at least explain those basic things. I'll give you another example. You can see Ganondorf attacking the Great Plateau, right, where they summon all those Molduga. Mm-hmm. And you can see a whole group of Gerudo with him. like these evil Gerudo, they play a flute, and then the Molduga come around, and they start attacking the plateau, and they ward off the attack. All fine and dandy, but then there's one sage who is a Gerudo. So clearly there was some sort of schism, some sort of separation between good Gerudo and bad Gerudo. Some aligned with Ganondorf and others didn't. But they never explain.
I wanted to see more. I wanted to see more of Ganondorf's like army, but they just appear there, and then when he is in front of the King of Hyrule, and like that's it. I think
it's the only cutscene. And why couldn't they just the storytelling in the past is just terrible in that regard? Because if you think back at Ocarina of Time, at least there they explained it. They explained why Nabooru was. Why she became a sage. She was like second in command of Ganondorf's army, and she at some point felt like I no longer align with his motivations, and
I can come up with a reason. Like, there's a reasonable reason that any person can come up with, but it's a problem that I have to come up with it. Like okay, maybe once he turned into a demon king, they're like, we're not about this, and the Gerudo turned on him, or some of the Gerudo turned on him, and one of them became a sage. Okay, perfectly reasonable. Why couldn't they say that somewhere?
Why cannot they? Can they not show that? Because I'm interested in that part of the ancient past. Like, why did the Gerudo have a separation between good and evil, and why did some of them align with Ganondorf, and then later we never see them again? Like, I want to know more about this time period, but they don't really explain a lot because there's only so many memories, and after that it's done. That's all you're gonna learn about the ancient past. And sure, you can put it in DLC. I'm not expecting much, because if we see what they did with the DLC for Breath of the Wild, there was like 4 extra cutscenes where Zelda just...
And nothing was elaborated on, really. Nothing really... It's
just Zelda going up to the Yeah, she went up to the champions and was like, hey, you want to pilot the Divine Beast? Yeah, sure. Cool.
Yeah.
And that's it, which we already know that they would accept that, so it's not even new information. It just shows how it was done. And maybe the final cutscene with the photograph where they took the actual picture. Yeah, that was cute, but judging from that, I don't expect that they're going to do much with the DLC.
It's just unfortunate to see people like twist themselves into knots to find explanations for these things that aren't explained in the game, and make inferences that aren't really in the game because they have to, because there's what else are we going to do? Because like, look, the whole thing where, okay, it's still in the same timeline, just a lot of time has passed between the other games and this one, and that's why there's a new founding of the Kingdom Hyrule. And I'm like, okay, but they're calling it Hyrule again, and Ganondorf is born into this kingdom again, and he's got Kotake and Koume, which are the names on the weapons of his Gerudo, and they're called that, and all of this thing. It's just like
you can even see them allegedly.
Yeah, and I'm just like, but why? Like, what's the difference between what you described and just a reboot? Literally, there's not what's the functional difference between what you're talking about, other than being convoluted and weird, and just it's a reboot? There's literally no difference. There's no functional difference between them at that point. And if there's no functional difference, then the easiest solution should be the one that we go with, and it's the one that's not so weird and convoluted, and that they're just doing it again. It seems to me.
We don't even know the name of the ancient sages. They never even give us a name.
No.
Or face.
Or a face, for that matter. So how are we supposed to know if this is a reboot, yes or no? Because if it is a reboot, fine, but then they left out a lot of information that we should have that would have been basic storytelling to convey to us. Because right now, I don't care about the ancient past because they don't elaborate on anything. But if it's not a reboot, then how is Ganondorf, Twinrova, and all those people, how are they back? And if they are back, how would Rauru not know about their evil intentions, because it's supposedly like a repeat of history?
How about,
like, aren't these people supposed to be guided by the gods? And
I think I understand what my problem is. So I play a lot of Dark Souls games. I love Souls lore. I love Elden Ring lore. There's an essential difference I found between Souls lore and Elden Ring lore, and the way that Zelda handles lore. And that in Souls lore and Elden Ring lore, there's still a lot of speculation. People come up with reasons in the same way that we're discussing. But I'm confident, everybody's confident that regardless of what people come up with, there's probably a right answer. Like something was thought of. Like they didn't just leave it blank and they didn't forget. They didn't mess it up. Something was intended for you to try and get,
Yes.
and people are arguing about different interpretations. But most people that are heavily into the lore kind of agree that Miyazaki thought of this. Like there was a reason why that item was there. There was a reason why there's disagreement in this part. Things are left intentionally ambiguous, but that doesn't mean that nothing was left there and we're all just spinning in circles. I'm sure that's not happening in Elden Ring lore. I'm not so sure that's not happening in Zelda lore. I'm not sure that we're all just like spinning our wheels and talking amongst ourselves when Nintendo didn't think of it, didn't care, didn't make lore of it in any way, didn't put things to be intentionally ambiguous. They just don't know, and they don't know. They don't care.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. It's a. Any of you ever seen Lost?
Yes, a little bit,
No.
a little bit.
Like back in the day when they first started with Lost, they had a clear roadmap for it, but as it went along, it was clear that they suddenly didn't. They kind of lost the plot themselves, and they just didn't know. They were making stuff up on the spot, but they continue to pretend like they didn't. They keep like in interviews, they kept saying, "Oh no, we totally know where this is going. We have it all planned out from the very beginning." And then years later, after the show had already wrapped up, they kind of started to come out and be like, yeah, actually, we were only supposed to have 3 seasons, which is what we wrote initially. And then the publisher wanted to have 6 seasons. And, what do you do at that point? We kind of had to just make stuff up. And you can tell that after season 3, the stuff just started making less and less sense. And it started to connect less and I think the same thing happened with Zelda at some point. I think for the first few games, they really did have a plan, sort of. They at least, it was clear that Ocarina of Time was supposed to be the precursor to A Link Between, or a Link to the Past, and how it was supposed to, because
Well, they said that.
clearly reference. Yeah, because there was a pig guy, and his name was Ganon, and he never appears in his human form, and in Ocarina of Time, they told the story of how he became
Yeah,
a pig.
yeah.
So maybe it doesn't connect perfectly, but there was at least something there. And here now, it feels like they just either don't care anymore or they just don't know where to go anymore. And it frustrates me because whenever you bring stuff like this up to less committed Zelda fans, let's just say, just the people that just play Zelda and they play Zelda and they have fun with it and then they move on to other things, they will say like, well, Zelda isn't about story. Come on, it's about the gameplay. It's like, no, that's not true. That's never been true. Yeah, for the first Zelda game, maybe. The first Zelda, but that was also a limitation of the medium back then. You couldn't really tell a huge elaborate story because you couldn't fit it on the disc. But ever since A Link to the Past, even, they started having stories, and it's one of the more story-driven IPs Nintendo has. It's not like Mario, like Zelda is not Minecraft where you just drop into this world and you don't care. They've always been telling pretty big stories, and maybe with Skyward Sword they went a little bit overboard and they sacrificed too much gameplay for the story, but I feel like now they've overcorrected and they've been doing the opposite, where they've been spending a whole year just perfecting these mechanics, which is, again, from a game design perspective, amazing what they did. It's a really entertaining game, and the fact that it all works so well, they are really giving a lot of other publisher, a run for their money. They're showing how you're supposed to do this. But imagine if they spent that year refining a better story, having better dungeons, which I'm pretty sure we'll probably get into later. But just there's always been, and story is important. The reason why Ocarina of Time was so amazing back when I was a kid was not just because the gameplay was good. It was also the story that made it really engaging. The twist that Sheik was Zelda all this time, that blew my mind back then. And how Ganondorf was this master manipulator who was like, well, like he was
It's so
everywhere.
iconic that it made it into Tears of the Kingdom. You know, that scene where he's kneeling before the king and plotting betrayal. That scene is so important that it made it back into Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah. And he's like, well, I can't, I tried getting my hands on these spiritual stones, but they won't, for the life of me, they won't give it to me. I'm just going to wait for this kid to collect them, and then I'll follow him into the sacred realm. And it was a very clever plan in the end. Of course, after that, he does do very little in the story, which is probably my biggest criticism of Ocarina of Time story, but stuff was happening there. And stepping out of the Temple of Time and seeing the market, the castle all worn down and broken, and there's redeads there. That made such a big impression on me back then, and it still does. And pretty much every Zelda game since then has had pretty good stories. So
at the very
yeah,
least,
maybe,
they had powerful stories that fit well with the theme that they were going for in that game. They
exactly.
paired well together, and
why should you sacrifice one for the other? That's my biggest gripe I have with that argument, is that why can you not have both? You can have a good story and good gameplay all together.
What's the
you
theme
shouldn't have to
of
choose.
Tears of the Kingdom? I think Onuma said it's hands. It's about touching things and controlling. It's like, okay, but that's the gameplay theme. Like, that's the gameplay theme that's happening. What about the story, bro? Like, you don't have to.
Yeah.
Okay, let me. This is the last criticism I'm going to put to the story, and this is why I think that this happened. We talked a lot about how, because the game is open world and you can go to several different places at once and interact with the story in any direction, because of that, they made that cutscene at the end of the 4 dungeons because they wanted you to have all that information at the end of the first dungeon, no matter which dungeon you went to. So their solution was a terrible solution, like the worst story solution I've ever seen in my life. To just show you the same cutscene again and again, the same boring, lame cutscene over and
Demon
over.
King, secret stones.
Yeah. So, obviously, one of the first things people will say that is, oh, well, they're explaining the sage that you're with or your companion. They don't know about it, but it's like,
maybe Link should have told them about it.
well, no, but it's like, that's where alternate dialogue comes in. Even if they just did a bit more of like they're like, oh wait, what do you mean? And they just made a bit more of like a summary of it. Like, oh, a long time ago there was a demon Cain. I tried to fight him along my fellow sages. He was too powerful, and Arcane was forced to seal him away. And now you must reawaken again. Just have that. Like the very first place you go, they have the full cutscene, and then they can just have a bit more of a Cliff Notes version, or they just work a bit extra on it, and each next one you have another part that's more that talks a bit more about it or something.
You know how Link, like, when he's explaining something, like a lengthy piece of explanation is needed, Link does like a hand wave motion.
Yeah,
like he's
that same hand wave.
Have the sages do that to us, because I don't want to see that cuts. It's going to be miserable going through that game again and looking at those cutscenes.
I was like, thank God. When I first found Minior, I'm like, so are you going to tell me the 5th time, or are we good? We know it. It's like, okay, cool.
I would have much preferred if they actually fleshed out those sages a little bit. Just give them a little bit more personality.
Yeah.
Show them what they were up to and who they are. Instead, it's just
one of
the same cutscene 4 times.
One of the things that was really cool about Breath of the Wild was how, like, those few cases where there was like alternate dialogue. The biggest one is like how you skip Sidon, go to Zora's domain. There's a whole alternate cutscene, and that's one of those moments where like,
hey.
well, that's yeah, you didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Did you know?
Had no idea.
You had no idea? Okay, yeah. So if you use climbing and stuff, and Ravioli's Gale and all that stuff, go to the domain, and he'll say, "Oh, sorry, we're busy currently at the moment," or whatever. The king has no time for visitors, and he's like, "Oh, wait, are you by chance a Hylian?" And then his Sidon Zora Prince card comes up, and then it goes into the talk with the king and stuff. That's an alternate cutscene you only see if you don't find him in that path, because they know, oh, this player got past this point. Sidon hasn't been introduced yet, so we're gonna have a little. Yeah, so it's so cool. So
They don't have
why
enough of
can't
those.
They,
They
just,
don't have enough of those. There's
yes, what? Yes, they just need more alternate dialogue options. And especially when you know, like, obviously Zelda's not Zelda.
Well, to be fair, the big difference there is that those are in-game cutscenes, and the ones that we see at the end of the dungeons, I think those are pre-rendered. So there's no
then
you
put
cannot
more
make those
in-game
dynamic.
put more in-game cutscenes then, like to explain things away. Look, I actually do
Yeah,
know
because this is Nintendo, because they absolutely can do that. It might be a lot of different options that they have to do, which means
it's a lot of work,
if
but
you have
maybe
more, yeah,
maybe
yeah,
it would have
it's
been
like
well spent, to do that work.
it's like those games where your options actually matter and they don't just say they matter, when in reality it gives you the illusion of choice. Like some companies might not have the resources for all those alternate options, but like Nintendo absolutely could do it.
Take another
Oh,
year.
I would just get rid of that whole cutscene altogether, because we don't need to learn about how they fought the Demon King together, and you don't have to explain that 4 times, because Minoru already does that, and she actually shows you the full story of where Rauru sacrifices himself. So why include it 4 times?
I'll tell you what.
Technically,
I do know why. I think I know why. So here's the difference between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. We begged for more story in Tears of the Kingdom. We wanted a more linear-ish plot. We wanted stuff to be happening in the present. But we also wanted open world, or at least we wanted kind of open world. And so this was their solution. So in Breath of the Wild, there actually is no story outside of what you learn in the Great Plateau. Every single important plot point is told to you at the end of the Great Plateau, and maybe like a little more in Kakariko Village. But basically, Rome is like, we fought Ganondorf. We resurrected the machines. We used the divine beasts. We fought him. We lost. He took over the divine beasts, and it's like that's it. Now you got to go to the castle and kill him. Go to the divine beasts and take them back over. I think Impa tells you that in Kakariko. But that's all the plot. There's nothing else to reveal. There's nothing that you don't know. In Tears of the Kingdom, it's full of stuff you don't know. You don't know who Rauru really is. You don't know he's the king of Hyrule. You don't know that Zelda's a dragon. You don't know that Zelda's in the past. You don't know that Zelda fought with the sages and is a sage of time. Like, you don't know any of that information, and that information is supposed to be conveyed to you through the cutscene at the end of the dungeon and through all the memory cutscenes.
Yes.
And so because the game doesn't know what you have access to, and because it has stuff to reveal to you, it gives you a big plot dump at the end of each dungeon to avoid having to do the work of having a lot of different iterations of stuff, of Link telling, oh, hey, I know where Zelda is. We don't have to be so worried about her because I know she's in the past. We still need to go. We still need to go to the regional phenomena and help these people, because maybe we'll get a clue of it there. But there's no hand wavy motion for Link to explain all that. So
Yeah.
So the problem is, that's dumb. Like that's the real problem.
Well, plus there are games that have already solved that problem. The Witcher did it pretty well, and that was open world too. So clearly there is a way to set flags and to know, like, oh, they've already done at least one dungeon, so we don't have to explain this again, and we can play a different cutscene or
My opinion,
something along those lines.
What I think they should have done is remove all the Mary cutscenes that they have, and have each of the 4 dungeons tell you parts of those memory cutscenes. Like all the revelations that you get in those memory cutscenes, don't play that cutscene with the Demon King. Each time you do a dungeon, one of those scenes will play, and no matter which dungeon you do first, the first scene will play, and then the second scene will play, and it'll be depending on which dungeon you do. So if you do the water dungeon first, it'll still be the first one. If you do the fire dungeon first, it'll still be the first one. And it'll just tell you things in order so that you're not like that. And you can still have cutscenes, but those cutscenes should talk about cool things. Like, oh, what was the Gerudo's opinion of Ganondorf? Let's talk about how stuff that's not directly related to important things about the story, but fleshes out the world building that you keep talking about. So scenes about the Gerudo thoughts on Ganondorf, scenes on the different sages, their names, why they're important or not important. and then the dungeons would actually be the big plot dumps at the end of it as a reward, a story reward, just like dungeons have always been, story rewards.
Yeah. Well, that also ties into Ganondorf himself in this game. Like, what was his plan? Seriously, like, what was his plan in this story? Like, he didn't do like when I saw it. It started so strong, so good. When that first part underground where you meet him, I was like, oh my god, this is the best
It was such
Zelda.
It was top notch. The opening for the game. Yeah.
Yeah, the atmosphere, the voice of Ganondorf while he's a corpse was really creepy, and just the way they set it up, it was so like the way the music ramps up slowly with every step you take. Like it started off so strong, and then after that, like, what does Ganondorf actually do in this game? He's supposed to be this guy who wants to either destroy or rule this world, but he just disappears, and it's supposed to be a mystery where he is, even though
He's literally in the same spot. He's literally in the same spot. He
he's literally
doesn't
in the
move
same
at
spot.
all.
And they make a mystery out of this too, where Koga's
where
like,
could he be?
we finally found the Demon King. He is under Hyrule Castle. I was like, yeah, no shit. That's where we last saw him, and he fell down into the abyss. So clearly he's still there. But he gets the Gorons high on some sort of drug rocks. He pollutes the waters of Zora's domain, and there's a storm and a sandstorm in the other two regions. It's like, that's the best he could do. Like, if that truly is his big plan, his big massive plan to take over Hyrule, he deserves to lose at that point, because he is doing nothing.
Imagine if he like created like a sinkhole or something and then pulled one of the villages down into the depths.
Yeah, or like after every dungeon, he does something crazy, like he attacks a settlement, or because in the past cutscene we see him creating this massive army where the Blood Moons like manifests, and there's like all these monsters marching.
Wouldn't you
upon
have loved
Hyrule.
to fight in like an apocalyptic scene like that? Like, his horse is so cool. I would have loved a thing like in Twilight Princess where you fight him on horseback.
Ganondorf on the horse was sick.
Yeah,
but it's like, why is it just a cutscene? Like, I was hoping they would revamp the Blood Moon more, make it more of an event. But it's just the same. It's just an alternate cutscene, a different. Oh, the Blood Moon rises again, or it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, even in the past, he gets the secret stone, and then the Blood Moon rises at some point, and I'm like, okay, so they never really explain where the Blood Moon came from, or like at least show him cursing the moon or something. I guess
his plan was to hydrate, and he needed time to hydrate. Like he seemed like there was like a pulsing mass underneath him or something. Like he was just, and he's trying to buy time so while he hydrates. But I'm like, you already fucked up the hero real good the first time. Like, what do you need to hide for?
Well, it's so it's all that explanation. It's so similar to Breath of the Wild, but also I can't remember what happens. But when you walk up to him, the first thing he says is like, "How disappointing," or something. I can't remember if like the intention or the suggestion was like he was waiting for you. But if he's waiting for you, then why is he delaying things and trying? If he's already like,
yeah, he says
powerful.
Like, how disappointing all these characters. All these weaklings are just roaming around. They should be dead or submissive to me. Or it's like, well, you like, what have you? Yeah, like, what have you done to actually make them fear you?
Nobody knows who you are. Literally, nobody knows who you are in this whole game.
Yeah, you're just sitting in your bathtub,
like,
rehydrating.
Real cool, Ganondorf. Hold on, takes out your picture. Snap. All right, that's one for the compendium. See ya, Ganondorf. It's like, all right, bye.
And that was my main, my biggest demand I had when it was revealed that Ganondorf would be coming back. I was like, please do not let him sit inside of a castle the whole story and just.
Well, he wasn't inside of a castle.
Underneath the castle.
Yeah, he was underneath the castle. Yeah. Well, they call it Ganon's lair or something, and that was my one big demand where I was like, man, that I really hope they don't do that, and they did it once again. And I'm like, if you want me to have a connection to the villain, you have to, especially if it's a human. Like with Calamity Ganon, he was more like a force of nature, blah blah blah. So I could, he didn't even speak, So in that regard, he really was not a character, which was fine, I guess. But this was a human being, like an actual person with thoughts, and it didn't feel that way because in the end, it doesn't feel like I know anything about this guy. He's just like I try to look at it from the perspective of someone who's never played a Zelda game in their life before. Like, what makes a good villain is when you humanize them, when you can empathize in some way, or at least relate to them, or you're just scared shitless of them. And neither of those I really got with this version of Ganondorf.
All the other versions
so
of
much
Ganondorf,
potential.
I think, did do that to some degree. Like the Wind Waker humanized Ganondorf. You understood his motivations a little more. Like Ocarina of Time, he was just a bastard, but he was a bastard that did things. He made moves out in the world.
And even in Twilight Princess, although he didn't do much in that story, but it was cool how Zant just showed
Very
up.
active, yeah.
He was
Zant
very active. He
Mhm.
would just show up somewhere and just mess you up. And like, I remember beating the third dungeon in Twilight Princess, and you're like, yay, I beat the dungeon. And you turn around and it's like, oh my God, Zant is suddenly here. And he curses Midna and he's doing things. And then you learn that he was just actually a very sad and pathetic guy who is kind of
Was
just
denied kingship and all that.
He felt like Kylo Ren, the Kylo Ren of the Zelda universe, where it's just some guy and he got all of his power was borrowed. He just got it from Ganondorf, and it made him arrogant and cool. And then
He was super cool. Before you
Yeah,
realized who he was super cool, very intimidating.
And then that facade falls down as soon as you get to his lair and you learn more about him from himself and from Midna. And that was actually a good... I know some people were disappointed by Zant because they thought he was so cool, and then he ended up being...
I loved it. I love it. I love it.
I am a little disappointed.
I think it was really good.
I'm a little disappointed, but I also like where they went with it. I'm like torn because I keep talking about the feelings of loss. Like, I lost the Zant that could have been, but I gained the Zant that's actually here, and he's pretty good too.
Well, and
the
plus
man, the meme.
It makes him more than just a guy in a mask being evil. It actually tells a story. Like, he was this reject that was just not cool. He wasn't accepted within his own tribe, and when you see him running out of the castle and having a temper, what do you call that? Like a tantrum. And he's just slamming his fists on the ground and his head on the ground. You're like, man, this guy was actually kind of pathetic, and all he is someone who borrowed his power from Ganondorf. And it also made Ganondorf much more smart in that way.
And you talk about them doing moves and like doing stuff in the world. Zant did stuff in the world immediately. The moment he got his power, what did he do? He went and attacked Hyrule Castle day one. Yes. He attacked Hyrule Castle and took over and forced Zelda to surrender. I was like, that is a man with a mission.
He also went after specifically those springs with the light spirits. It shows the cutscenes of going after, and that's how, and it also explains why they found Ilya and Link, because they're at one of those springs.
Yeah. And when when he notices that the springs are coming back online, he's like, no, I got to deal with this personally, today, right now, myself. Basically kills Midna almost.
Yeah, and in Wind Waker, it also kind of made sense. Like, he was looking for Zelda, so he was just like, I'm gonna kidnap every blonde girl in this kingdom until I find her. He was actively doing stuff. He destroyed Great Fish Isle to go after Jaboon. He did a lot of. They even explained how he managed to break free and how he was able to travel from below the waves to the Forsaken Fortress and stuff. There was. Yeah, he created some sort of portal. Between because his tower is right below the Forsaken Fortress, so that's how he broke free from below the waves and all that stuff. So there was something there. And Wind Waker is a pretty short game too, so they managed to tell a lot in a game which only had 5 dungeons and was I think they ran out of time, kind of. They there's a lot of cut content.
to be fair, Ganondorf in Tears of the Kingdom, there are some things he does immediately. Like, for example, it was smart of him to target the Lost Woods.
Yeah.
But that's as far as he goes, and he never like he doesn't personally ever go anywhere.
Yeah, plus he doesn't react to the stuff you do. He just sets up all these things, like, oh, let me create a blizzard near Rito Village, and I will pollute the waters of Zora's domain. But then you actively reverse all of his influences one by one, and he doesn't react to it at all. He doesn't get angry at it. He doesn't suddenly show up and like...
My problem with him
like,
trying to buy time is that, okay, he's buying time to get hydrated, but if you're a speedrunner and you decide to go straight at him as soon as you get control of Link, he gets hydrated anyway. Like, you still have to do the same fight. So did you really need the time to get back to full power if you don't spend any of the time going to any of the locations and reversing his effects?
Yeah, yeah. He even disguises himself as Zelda and just goes up to the people of Kakariko Village and is like, don't go near that ruin.
He could have done a lot more with some of those. It's like, oh no, we can't go to the. He's like, he's in his tub thinking, I'm a genius. When all he's like, oh yeah, don't go there, don't go to that ruin. It's like,
and that's another
diabolical.
That's another example of like ludonarrative dissonance, where you already saw the cutscene where Sonia gets killed. You already saw the cutscene where Zelda turns into a dragon. But the game doesn't account for that fact that Link knows that. So you go up to that guy to the ring ruin, and he's still like, nope, Princess Zelda told us not to go.
It's worse than that, actually, because you can get all the cutscenes and the final cutscene at the end and the Master Sword. So you know for sure it's not the real Zelda, and you know for sure that Ganondorf controls puppets, and can do 3 dungeons. So you've seen the cutscene, but you still can't go over there until you do the 4th one. So Link will not tell this man what he already knows until that last dungeon goes down.
Yeah, you should be like, get out of the way, you old geezer. I know more than you. We have to get to this ruin or whatever. But no, he just goes along with it, and that just makes Link look like a doofus. Because when he goes to the castle and chases Puppet Zelda around, it's also like, you're just chasing your tail. You already know it's not really. That's not Zelda.
They could easily fix it by like when he finally goes to the sanctum area of the castle. You can have that similar cutscene, but if like you've seen, a certain amount of stuff and how you have enough context, just have him be more like battle ready as like Zelda's talking to him and he's like looking around. Have him slowly go for his blade and just have his hand on it ready to strike, because he knows what's going to happen. That's all you really have to do.
Anything like that would have been good. Anything.
Because you could see, because obviously, even if that's not Zelda, he's going to want to go and deal with that threat. He's still going to have that motivation to go to the castle.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't mind the fact that he goes there. I just mind the fact that Link pretends like he doesn't know, even to his own friends. And that just bothers me, because
it takes me out of the immersion. It takes me out of the narrative.
Especially with a character like Link, who you are supposed to project yourself onto him. And if I know more, if I'm 2 steps ahead of the main character, who is my avatar, then you're not really connecting to the avatar. If it was a character on its own, like in games like Heavy Rain, or like those more story-driven video games, like what's another good example? Like those detective type of games, yeah, it's possible that you already know the solution before the main character does, because, but that's his own character, so he may not know, and I do. But in games like Skyrim or Zelda, where Link is supposed to be me, then if Link's actions don't reflect what I do or what I think or what I already know, then I'm not gonna be able to, like, then it's not my avatar anymore. Because I'm just screaming at the screen like, Link, you idiot, you already saw her turning into a dragon. You know she's in the past. You know all this already. Why are you not telling anyone about this?
Yeah, there's several side quests that involve looking for Zelda, or like, oh, maybe Zelda's over here. Like the newspaper side quests, like, oh, there's Zelda's been spotted over here. Like, that she's not there. Like maybe still do the quest because maybe you want to help the newspaper or something, but like, you need to tell people that it's not Zelda. Like there are in-game reasons why you might want to tell everyone that there's an imposter Zelda running around doing bad things.
Yeah, it's a massive threat to everyone. I think I even said that on Twitter as a defense. Like, the people deserve to know. Yeah. I guess that's just the biggest problem with this whole story. Well,
it's because they're
aside
not
from
used
the
to
few
doing
plot
open
holes.
world. They're still not used to this. Like they still not. Nintendo is Zelda team is not used to doing this non-linear open world thing. And the reason that it wasn't so obvious in Breath of the Wild was because it, like I said, all the information was out there from the beginning. There was no story to tell. All the story was told at the Great Plateau. There was nothing else to reveal. And when they have stuff to reveal and they put it out of order and like they're not used to it. They're not accustomed to it. Maybe they'll do better in the next one.
Yeah. And I feel like we're probably going to receive some criticism when you say, like, of all the stuff we've covered so far, like I said, people can make excuses for certain story beats, or maybe we've missed something. But overall, I think it's a pretty objective take to say, like, this story has a lot of plot holes in it, which don't make sense. And it just, it lacks a certain flow and story building or world building that should be normal in a Zelda game.
I also just think it's not very good.
Game.
Like maybe at this point we will disagree, but I also just think the story itself, even if you do everything in the correct order, the perfect order, and you don't get any of the Mary cutscenes out of order, and you have everything exact, and none of this immersion breaking stuff happens, and you're just playing the story, other than
as intended.
Yeah, as intended. Other than the Zelda thing, which I admit is fantastic. You know, it's fantastic. And the beginning part where you first initially see Ganondorf. Other than that, the actual story, the narrative, is fairly weak, maybe weaker than Breath of the Wild. Maybe the
Agreed.
weakest that the Zelda game's ever had. It's just not very interesting, every Secret Stone cutscene with the sages and the new sages, like, that's my Secret Stone. I can't with the Saturday morning cartoon thing. Not even Breath of the Wild was like this.
Why are they called Secret Stones?
Yeah, why are they called Secret Stones?
They just changing it to Sacred Stones would be like significantly better. I don't know. It's such a weird. It's so weird.
Why is Ganondorf
It's a
so
weird
OP
name.
with his stone that like 6 other people with their stones can't deal with him?
Yeah.
Because the power of friendship doesn't work until it's relevant to the plot.
Well, it's funny how Minoru at the end is like, this is just a theory, but I think this is how they changed you back into a human. It's like, oh, so even the characters have to make excuses for why something happened. Because Rauru, like I said, I thought he passed
Minoru
on.
must be feeling real embarrassed there after all her warning to Zelda. It's like, oh, well.
Yeah, because she's a Zonai. Isn't she supposed to know exactly how it works and what the limitations of it are? But then
No Zonai
it
has
gets
ever tried to turn other people back from being dragons. Like they just never thought of it before.
Yeah, because clearly it is possible. And again, sure, you could probably make up some sort of story to make it at least make a little bit more sense. Where you're like, well, it took the power of both Link, Sonya, and Rauru to turn her back. But then still, how? Like, what are the implications of that? Like, why would that even work?
It's because they wanted it to work in the story.
Well, I was also thinking, what was stopping them from doing it before the Ganondorf fight?
Yeah.
Like, if you sent like Link already has the Master Sword. If you like use it at that time, then you'd have him with Zelda with the power of time and light against Ganondorf.
Yeah, to have another sage
So,
to
like,
help.
And how
Yeah.
does Zelda as a dragon join you in the final fight if she's supposed to be? Because they clearly say
I think that's a fine, because I'd argue then what threat would a Ganon have posed turning into a dragon if he's not himself anymore? So I think it was just a natural darkness versus light thing.
Yeah,
I'm kind of
okay,
okay. I'm
fine.
kind of okay with Zelda
But-
helping you because like
Yeah.
she's
because it's cool.
well, yeah, because it's
Well,
cool, but
well,
it's
no, but, like, why-
instinct. Like
but
she's just following her instincts. She doesn't know
Yes.
why she's helping Link.
Why would again? Why once Ganondorf? By that logic, wouldn't once Ganondorf transforms?
Why is he destroying
It's
stuff?
like, oh yeah, it's just like, oh yeah, I'm a dragon flying around now. Cool.
But that,
You know?
but you need a setup for that. That's my biggest problem with again.
You just wanted
one of the-
something said. But let me do what other people
Well,
what we've been talking about and make excuses for it. And this is the excuse that I come up with for it because it's cool and I want to excuse it. And it's that the secret stones are supposed to take your hidden traits. It's supposed to take your actual skills and instincts and like turn them up to 11. And so if you eat it, your dragon form would just follow your basest instincts. So Zelda would protect and keep this master source safe and fuse it with her sacred power and when she sees Link out there, she's following him around in the sky area, and then when he finally leaves, she's just wandering around Hyrule in a circle. And Ganondorf would just destroy stuff because that's his nature.
I think it's a fine
Well-
explanation for that. I didn't really have an issue with.
Well, let
that,
me
honestly.
explain what I feel like. Like again, when there's a villain in the story, I need to have some sort of explanation as to why, like a motivation as to why he would do what he does. And throughout the whole story, he makes it clear that he wants to rule. He doesn't want to destroy Hyrule. He wants to rule Hyrule because he feels like that's his legacy. That's his destiny, I should say. Like he feels like I am a king should rule. But him swallowing the stone, what does he get out of it? Like, yeah, maybe he will destroy Hyrule, but he will never be able to turn back, as far as he knows, into his normal human form, which is just not what that goes against what he was trying to do before that.
Yeah.
Well,
And
yeah,
you-
but he's.
But at
yeah,
that point, he was losing. He's about to lose.
Yeah, he was losing. At that point, he just wants
To win.
It's like, well, think about it this way as well. Wind Waker Ganondorf had no intention to kill Link or Zelda, but once he lost the Triforce, all of a sudden he's like, "Well, screw you guys," and he
Okay, that's
went to
fair.
kill them. So
No,
it,
okay,
it,
that's fair.
I'm pretty sure he just was like, okay, it's a chance he was willing to take, just like Zelda. He's like, well, I'm on my last thing. I'm about to die. I might as well.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. To me, it felt like it came a bit out of nowhere, but the
I
way
like
you
that.
explain it, I think
I like that.
I stand corrected, I guess.
So, I think that when I'm making the, I use timestamps for these videos, and now I'm like sitting here. It's going to be like, the first timestamp is just going to be intro, and then like 3 minutes later, the rest of it's just going to be criticism, and that's the whole timestamp. That's the whole timestamp for this podcast.
We criticize because we love.
No, even better. Intro, and then like 3 minutes in, what we loved about it, because we did talk about it, and then like 6 minutes in, criticism. That's the whole like
All 3 hours.
Well, I mean, it's very easy to tell people why you love a game. It's much harder to explain why you didn't like certain things, because for me it's just gameplay. It's just so fun. It's just such a fun game to play.
Most fun Zelda game. I still think it's the top most fun Zelda game of all time. There's never been a more fun one to play. I just don't like the story very much. Okay.
I think for me personally, it doesn't break my top 5, but
It still doesn't break your top 5?
yeah.
What's your top 5 now?
Right.
Where are we at?
ooh. Well, I think it's still like Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, in no particular order, of course. Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, maybe Skyward Sword, because it has grown on me quite a bit. Breath of the Wild used to be in there, but now I'm not so sure.
It's my favorite game. My top 3 before this was A Link Between Worlds, Majora's
that's such
Mask,
a-
and Wind Waker HD. It's kind of like Monster Maze, where like Breath of the Wild wasn't actually in my top, which people get surprised about. But personally, Tears of the Kingdom, from what I've played, it is my favorite I now have a favorite Zelda game,
Okay.
and that's Tears of the Kingdom.
Okay, see, there you go. Look, it's just when I think about the amount of when I think about the amount of time I played the other games, like I don't think any of those, except for Breath of the Wild, if you the amount of time that I've spent playing all the Zelda games together probably don't amount to the amount of time I spent Tears of the Kingdom, in the last since its release. Because those games are like less than 20 hours long each, and I'm just over here in the depths, like plucking away, bringing light to the darkness, and enjoying myself while I'm doing it. I can't not give it a high position. It's still not number one, but for me, but
well, as a content creator, it's kind of hard to determine whether how much you've played of something is your enjoyment, because yes, people are surprised when they hear my Breath of the Wild isn't my favorite game because of all the videos, but that's because of all the Zelda games. It seems like just the most enjoyable one to talk about because there was a lot to talk about, and obviously it's a most recent game, so there were a lot of stuff that you could still discuss, and
Well,
there's so much of that time. I have put so much time into Breath of the Wild, but a lot of that time has just been like researching stuff and getting footage and yeah.
For me, I should clarify, just because it doesn't break my top 5 doesn't mean I don't like it a whole lot.
Because you have to, if you compare something, something's, no matter how good it is, there's gonna be something at the bottom of the list if you're like categorizing things.
it's Breath of the Wild for me now.
And there's so many good Zelda games that I haven't even mentioned. Like I absolutely adore A Link to the Past. It's still one of my favorite experiences ever. But it's weird to pitch that game to a 3D Zelda game because it just feels different. So I think I said that on the last one of the previous podcasts, where I'm like, I tend to separate the 2D and the 3D Zelda games. But there are 2D Zelda games that I enjoy as much, if not more, than some of the 3D ones, which I have huge nostalgia for, or just think they are amazing in so many ways. I guess I've just been more impressed when it comes to both story and the stuff I found in other games compared to Tears of the Kingdom. And I think Elden Ring kind of spoiled me in a way, which is very unfortunate, because if Elden Ring didn't come out between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, maybe it would have been different. But I think Elden Ring really set a standard for me where it's undeniable for me that, sure, it doesn't have all the crazy mechanics, but again, it's also a bit of a personal thing because I don't interact with the vehicle building all that much. I will do it once in a while when I need to get somewhere. I'm like, well, there's a bunch of stuff here anyway. I might as well build a little airplane, or, during a shrine quest, or inside of shrines, there's things you need to do, and I will do it either in a completely different convoluted way or as intended, and I will feel smart for it or incredibly dumb depending on the situation. But overall, I didn't interact with the whole crafting that much.
Well, it also depends on your play style. Like, yeah. On stream, I was like, all right, let's purposely try to make like the most ridiculous contraptions that'll work on the Sky Island where you had the broken rail. I just fused like 5 minecarts together and kept trying to do it until eventually it worked. But what I've been playing recently, it is from like a content creation standpoint, because like my first actual playthrough I'm doing without live streaming it is like the playthrough I'm putting on my no commentary channel for footage and stuff. So when I'm playing that, I'm more thinking a lot efficient. Like, how can I do this, quickly? So rather than build these elaborate contraptions, I'm just constantly resorting to that super basic steering wheel and 2 fans bike to get around.
It really depends on what you're looking for in a Zelda game. that's going to be such a big deciding factor where this game will place on your list and what kind of score you would get.
The only
give
reason
it.
this game isn't higher for me, like number one, and I'm sure for both of you too, is that I don't know for both of you, but for me, like story is such an important element of why I like games. I need proper justifications for why my character's doing the same thing. I'm not just a gameplay guy. Story flavors everything. Okay, when
Same here.
when I said that I was having the most fun and this was my top game, it was before I interacted with any of the with very minimal memory cutscenes and before I got past the first dungeon. And that's because all the potential of the story was there, and I was doing caves, and I was doing the depths, and I was doing shrines, and exploring Hyrule, and doing the side quests. That was like the top moment for me, because in context, a lot of the stuff that you do while looking for Zelda makes a lot of immersive sense. So if you're doing the side quest with the newspaper guy, if you don't know where Zelda is, this is very immersive. Like this is a proper justification for doing this quest. You as the player know that you're probably not going to find Zelda in a side quest, but Link doesn't know that, so you can be immersed in what you're doing. It's like, oh, Link, he's not just dicking around. He's not just wasting his time. He's actually looking for Zelda while doing these side quests. While he's looking for, you don't know if she's in the depths or not. Go look in the depths, explore. You don't know if there's a clue in the Sky Islands. Go explore around. She could be anywhere.
It's like investigating a UFO sighting.
Yeah, yeah. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. That moment where the story possibilities aligned with what I was doing to keep me fully immersed and gave me a justification for not engaging with the story. Was peak for me. It's the best moment I've ever had in a Zelda game.
Oh yeah, for sure. But for me, it's I need to have multiple things to satisfy me where I would give it a 10 out of 10 and it's going to be my favorite Zelda game ever. And unfortunately for me personally, it didn't meet that criteria. I thought the dungeons were lackluster. I thought the story, like you said, it just, I didn't feel the justification for what I was doing.
Yeah, it goes away after you know enough.
Yeah. It again started off strong, ended pretty damn strong if you disregard the whole, like, whether you're what like, depending on your opinion about Zelda transforming back into a human at the end.
If that doesn't bother you, you're probably going to be all right. Like you're going to have a strong impression of the story. I think you're right.
Yeah. So it started off very strong and it ended on a high note, but everything in between, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Like characters, like I said, like characters withholding information or not reacting to a certain development, and it all comes down to that dissonance between where you feel like you're smarter than the characters. And I'm supposed to be the dumb one, and the characters are supposed to be solving things if you want me to get into a story. And unfortunately, I didn't feel that. And maybe that's because I'm older now, but back in the day, I didn't see that coming where Sheik was Zelda all this time. Maybe because I was 10.
I think you'd probably still be surprised if you didn't know anything about Zelda. You know, you'd probably not, like a significant percentage of people wouldn't get that until it happened.
Yeah. And the stories of also like games like Majora's Mask, they only get more complicated and grimmer the more you start thinking about it. And with Tears of the Kingdom, it's the opposite. The more you think about it, the more it falls apart, where you're like, that would not happen, or this could have been easily solved if that character just said something about what they experienced or what they know, instead of just being like, well, see you later, and then just turning into particles and then showing up on, like, at the very end. Which I'm not saying every other Zelda game was perfect in that way. I thought in Twilight Princess it was terrible how Zelda suddenly was just there at the end.
Yeah,
that was genuinely a bad piece of writing, because they don't justify why she's back.
it was worse, honestly. If I'm being honest, like that was worse than this.
Yeah, but everything else was so good, like Midna's character development and Zan's contributions to the story, that it didn't matter as much. Even Yeah.
Plus, there was that
So,
loss because Midna had to leave, and she shattered the mirror behind her.
oh yeah, that was so beautiful. But you know, if you're not that type of Zelda game who doesn't care about that things, about that kind of stuff, I should say, if you thought the divine beasts were fine, you're gonna have a field day with this game because these are essentially the divine beasts, but I would say better
With the
because they are
dungeons.
at least,
Okay,
yeah, with the dungeons.
let's.
I don't think. Well, you mentioned how they were. You still felt they were lackluster.
Yes.
While I don't think any of them stand out in regards to like the Forest Temple or Ancient Cistern,
Mm-hmm.
I still thought they were pretty good. Like the reskinned divine beasts, but they have way more identity than the divine beasts.
They were
Absolutely,
good.
yeah.
They were good divine beasts.
Yeah, I really liked the lightning temple. I really liked the atmosphere of that one. That one was really cool, as well as the ship.
Okay, let's talk about the
Those are my
dungeons then.
favorites.
Let's do that. Technically, the dungeons gave me everything I said I wanted. You know, like but before in our previous streams before this game came out, I made it very clear I'm not expecting these to be fully classic dungeons. They can't do that. They're not going to make you have keys and um, dungeon items that are required to clear the dungeon. But what they might have is, you know, music that's aesthetically pleasing, that's part of the dungeon. The dungeon itself is visually appealing, and it's different for each region. It's not the same divine beast looking thing, and you know, bigger and more complicated. And I think all of those were checked out. All of those things happened. I still don't think they're good enough. They're still not good enough. I've realized I'm greedy. I want more.
Well, I don't see why they can't just like limit Link's powers when in the dungeons. There's so much freedom elsewhere and freedom in the shrines. So why can't you just have limits with like ascend and recall and stuff in the dungeons? I would have preferred if it was more traditional, obviously.
I like
it would have
them. I like
been
them. There's step
better.
up. There's
Yeah,
big step up
yeah,
from
yeah.
the beast. I do like them. But
Mhm.
am I the only one that thinks that they're like gameplay wise they're the weakest part of the game? Like forgetting story, like gameplay wise, they're worse than even like doing Sky Islands. You know, like they're worse than even doing a couple of shrines. Like the shrines puzzles felt more interesting to me and more engaging.
I don't know. I'd say Sky Islands are weaker. Still
Really?
in
Yeah,
gameplay.
same here.
Yeah.
Am I the only one that likes the Sky Islands?
It's well. They advertise them so much, and I get how a big part of it probably was they were trying to like make the depths a surprise, and I'm grateful for that. I'm so happy the depths wasn't really spoiled at all or anything, but I was expecting a bit more out of the Sky Islands. A lot of the puzzle gameplay stuff for the shrines up there is, oh, the stone's on another Sky Island higher up. Get it from
here.
Get it down
Yeah.
here. So you just build a basic plane thing to carry it down. I think that was a more disappointing gameplay wise.
Let me make a case for the Sky Islands. The Sky Islands are
Okay.
super disappointed if you have Ultra Hand and you already have an efficient flying vehicle. But like if you don't have Ultra Hand and you're just engaging with the Sky Islands normally, they're like little puzzles. Like you often can't get to the highest one or to the place where the shrine is, and you have to figure out, like they'll give you stuff around and like, okay, figure out how to get this from here to here, and it's not always clear. A lot of the time you have to figure out, okay, what did they want me to do, and if you don't have other options with a bunch of Ultra Hand Zonite usage, you have to work within bounds, and I found myself working within those bounds a lot in those Sky Islands, to the point where I was like, okay, I get where they were going. These are decent puzzles. These are some of the best puzzles in the game. With messing around with all their different powers, using only the stuff that they give you in those islands, because there's almost always a right solution, and without Ultra Hand, you have to use the right solution or some variation of it. And so, like, just strictly puzzle wise, I actually really liked the puzzles in the Sky Islands. I thought they were some of the strongest in the game.
They still feel incredibly similar though. In my
Yeah, they're the Sky Island aesthetic is exactly the same. It's kind of like the problem people had with shrines and divine beasts. It just looks the same.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
also no like most of the islands are just a bunch of ruins.
They have like a chest, or they don't know what to put here, so it's like, oh yeah, we'll just put another shrine and put a stone on this island for you to go to. It just
I guess, like Will said, for a game that advertised the Sky Islands so much, I do feel like maybe again it's also our expectations that are just too high for that kind
We-
of stuff. But
we
remember
needed a
how
couple. We needed a couple bigger ones like the Sky Plateau.
I really wanted a Zonai civilization up there. Uh,
Yeah, I was about to say, like, remember all the expectations we had like, maybe we'll find like the remnants of Skyloft up there or something. Like the you'll see Skyloft but in a completely ruined state, or whatever, the city in the sky, or something along those lines. But they feel very very video gamey. It's just a little platform with some ruins on it, and they're all almost identical ruins. There's no implication for, yeah, you cannot tell what that building would have been used for, or you don't find like transcripts or little notes that the Zonai left behind. There's no world building up there. Yeah, like you would in the depths. So it's kind of weird to me how they feel almost kind of tagged on.
well, but if that's because you're expecting them to do, like, once you realize they're just puzzles, like, think of them as shrines, just think of them as glorified shrines, and all of a sudden you realize that, oh, these are just good puzzle areas, and I think your tune would change if you take away all of those expectations that it have any narrative value or any
Yes.
weight other than
Yes.
just straight up interesting puzzles. But like in the art book, they showed the Zonai warriors from the memory cutscenes. And when you see them in the art book, you're like, oh, we're going to see the Zonai. We're going to actually get to meet like a Zonai civilization, ancient Hylian Zonai people. That was one of the reasons why I thought that Rauru wasn't a Zonai and that these people were the Zonai. That was because I had seen that in the art book. So I was really hoping like there'd be at least one big Zonai village up there still around, passing stories down and helping you out, and I was expecting it in the Thunderhead, perhaps.
Yeah.
Sad we didn't get any of that.
And even if we didn't
There are
meet
ships
Zonai,
and no one's in the ships.
Mhm.
They're just ships.
they're just ships. Yeah, they're just floating there. It's very Mario Galaxy-esque. It's just a floating thing.
Same technology, bro. Theory videos. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, even that, it's kind of weird how they never explain why the Sky Islands suddenly became visible. Why they were not visible in Breath of the Wild, but now they are.
Some people have said that the cloud barrier is there again from Skyward Sword, and when Zelda comes out, you can kind of see the clouds dissipating, so that they think the cloud barrier is gone. But again, that's just explaining.
Again, they did
well,
it.
well,
They
well,
did
also
a horrible...
the islands were also there, I think, before Link gets off. Like it's not like that cloud barrier dissipates and all of a sudden all the islands are visible. It's just his island that's protected, I think. Because
all they had to do was show what happened, like when the upheaval started, like all the caves and chasms. I totally get why that happens, because it's the upheaval. Like Ganondorf does something, and Hyrule kind of starts falling apart a little bit, and all these new caves and and chasms start opening up. But the islands, they don't really show. You just suddenly see debris falling from the sky, but you don't see a barrier breaking. There's no in-game explanation. Like, nobody in the game itself explains why the islands are suddenly there. Everybody just accepts it.
Like, did Ganondorf do it on purpose for a reason? You know, were they meant to go down naturally?
It doesn't tie into his motivation or story in any way. Nobody questions it. Nobody's like, why didn't we see these islands before? Why are they suddenly here? So again, we have to fill in the gaps ourselves, and sometimes that's okay, but in other cases it's like, that's just basic storytelling that you're missing here.
Why did Ganondorf raise Hyrule Castle?
Yeah.
To be cool.
It had no function.
To be cool. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Make you think that's where he is and make it hard to get in there so that you don't get to his actual entrance, which is a lot easier to get into because he raised Hyrule Castle.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, that's kind of weird because you literally see him fall in the cutscene into down in the depths, and like people are gonna be interested in that before they go to the castle.
You know what was super cool? The torch that Zelda was holding in the cutscene is down there, like where she falls. That was actually neat.
I heard, yeah, I heard that. I didn't go back to check, but yeah, it's really cool.
Can I use that in my video? I didn't know that.
Yeah, go for it.
That's a funny little.
I thought that was an
lore
incredibly
detail,
cool
for sure.
detail that you can
Yeah,
find
I
the
saw
torch.
a comment on it once, and I'm like, oh, whoa.
But yeah, I think we were talking about the dungeons before.
Yeah.
Do you feel like when I thought about a dungeon, I was kind of envisioning something like Hyrule Castle from Breath of the Wild, but it wasn't that either, not really. And I actually contradicting myself a little bit because I did say I wanted them not to limit Link's abilities in the dungeons, so you can just use everything you want and get around any way you want. But now that I've actually seen it in action, I'm starting to backpedal on that a little bit
Yes!
because
That's what I want to hear.
I feel
I wanted it. I always was fine with wanted them to limit it. I don't like.
Well, to me, I always thought it was a bit weird how, like, why can you not climb this wall, but you can climb this wall? It always, and I even gave an example of ice. Like, why can I climb an ice wall with my bare hands, but you cannot even do that in this game anymore? So they kind of justify that now, which is kind of funny. But sometimes you have to actually experience it and see it in action before you can make up your mind what you really want. And in this case, I feel like I was wrong about that. I think they should have limited him a little bit more because you can get through some of these dungeons. You can get through in under 20 minutes.
Yeah, if you use all the bullshit available to you, even Limcube,
especially the water temple.
Even Limcube, who's a speedrunner, I had him on a podcast. Everybody has said the same thing. I think almost everyone agrees that the gameplay-wise, the dungeons are among the weakest parts. Although, look, like atmosphere-wise, they're still pretty good. Like they did a good job with the atmosphere, especially if you include the lead up to the dungeon. If you don't separate the two things, and the lead up to the dungeon is included, the lead up to the tornado in Hebra, the lead up to the Zora dungeon. They're pretty good. Like atmosphere wise, the music is nice, the atmosphere is nice. I'm very happy with them in that respect. But the people long for their chains. The people long for chains once more. There's so much freedom everywhere in the game. Do we have to have it in every single aspect of it? Obviously not, because the shrines limit you. They take away your ability to use zonite materials. You can't use Ultra Hand in there to make stuff. You can't.
Well, you can't bring out the parts.
Yeah. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
You can't. You can't
auto build. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't use the auto build. You can't. That's what I meant. You can't. You can't climb surfaces they don't say you can climb. Like, just limitations are not inherently a bad thing. Even Nintendo knows that because they keep putting limitations. Even Nintendo knows that because they keep nerfing duplication glitches. You know,
Yeah.
It's time to go all in. It's time to bring back the classic dungeons. Like it's over.
Especially because if you really value your gameplay time with this game, you're going to want to explore a lot. Before I see people purposely stalling the game for themselves. They're like, I've done one dungeon, but I want to do so many other things because I don't want to finish the game just yet. I'm not ready to end my experience just yet. And I kind of did the same thing after I did the Gerudo dungeon first. And then after that, I was like, I want to do so many other things. I want to check out the depths and the caves, and I'm not ready for this game to end just yet. And usually dungeons means that you're progressing through the main story quite a bit. But the problem is, once I did get to those dungeons, I had so many auto build schematics that I could get anywhere where I wanted just by. I had one schematic for a super spring, it's called. And it's just basically 3 springs with one of those crystals at the bottom so it doesn't slide.
Stabilizer.
So, yeah, no, not a stabilizer. Those pointy crystals, those stakes. Yeah, the stakes
okay.
that just melt into the ground or whatever surface you stick them on. And with that, you can get through the Goron dungeon so quickly because most of it is verticality. The Zora one too, yeah, because it's all about verticality and how are you going to get there. But with the Super Spring, you can get anywhere super high up. And if you've done at least a fair amount of shrines, you will have enough stamina too. So you can cheese those dungeons so quickly, whereas you couldn't really do that with the old ones. And I even saw someone commenting and saying like, well, we are viewing those older dungeons from the older games through rose-tinted glasses. Is that how they call it?
Yeah, nostalgia.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, we didn't. No, we don't. That's not true at all. If you really go back
Just
and
go back and play
analyze
them.
those
Just go play them right now. You don't have to have roasted
Like
glasses.
when you
Play them today.
Well, you just have to like ask yourself the question like, when I get to this point in the game, is it a point that I'm looking forward to doing? You know, that's all. And if it is, then yeah, it's still good. Personally, I think the Zora one was one of the weaker dungeons compared to all of them, and specifically for the Goron quest, it felt like there was way less of a build up than the other ones. But for Hebra, you do that whole ascend to get to the top, but then that's when the dungeon starts. In the Goron one, you just go to Goron City, you talk to Unibo, you go to that area, you quickly do a little fight, then you go up to Death Mountain, do that really quick fight against that thing coming from Death Mountain, and then into the depths, and then you just go walk a bit, bam, temple. It felt like there was less of a build up for that one.
Yeah, that one was less impressive. The build up to Gerudo area was great though.
Really cool. Really
yeah,
cool.
that was really cool.
I love their interpretation of Gibdos. I'm disappointed that they don't scream.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the only thing.
Do they have a grab
but
attack?
Like Queen Gibdo was so cool.
Yeah, and it was also cool walking into Gerudo Town and seeing it all abandoned, and it was actually kind of spooky.
Yeah, I loved the atmosphere of every place when you went to see how it was doing. In a way, I kind of miss some of them. Like, I miss the Rito Village with snow. After you solve it, you're like, oh, it looks like Breath of the Wild. But it was so cool going to the Lightning Temple, and then the boss of that temple just comes out, and you got to quickly fight it. It's like, what?
Ganondorf should take notes from the Gibdo Queen.
But I think that's kind of the thing. It's like it has some elements that call back to the older dungeons again.
They're trying though. They're trying.
They really tried, and in some ways they succeeded. The bosses are, miles ahead of the ones from the Divine Beast because it was all the same boss. So they definitely heard that criticism. But classic dungeons, they are not for sure. Because if you really start to, even if you don't want to play all the older games, just look up boss keys and look up all the cool things that they did with the older dungeons, like how they all had central mechanics. They all had mini bosses. Some of them sometimes 2 mini bosses in one dungeon. They all had very unique ways of getting around the dungeon. And here it's just 4 times copy paste, activate the 4 or 5 switches. And that's it.
Something like Zant as a boss is leagues better than anything Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom has come up with so far, boss-wise. Like, Zant is such an impressive boss fight, musically, aesthetically. I get, like, it's not a difficult boss fight because the old Zelda games didn't focus on difficulty. Like, but still, even if and difficulty is super important to me. Like, my whole channel, I'm always harping on about things to need to be harder. But even I'm like, sometimes other things matter more. and Zant had that special sauce that a lot of these bosses don't.
Well, I feel the same way about Morpheal from the water or the Lake Bat Temple. It's a super, super easy boss, but the spectacle behind it is so cool. Same with the boss for the City in the Sky in Twilight Princess with the dragon fight. Yeah, it just looks cool, and it. If I want to play a hard game, I'll play a Souls game or something else. Like I don't know, just some of my favorite games are not hard games. Many of my favorite games are not necessarily hard games, and I think that's fine. Sometimes that's why I love the final fight in Tears of the Kingdom, because it's very pleasing to the eye, and having those two dragons fighting, even though it's very easy, it's very hard to screw up that section. It just looks cool. So that I don't have problems with. But what I have problems with these new dungeons, it still feels like a half step, because there's no mini boss. Most of the enemies are once again the same damn constructs over and over again. It's just filled with constructs, whereas all the other dungeons, the older dungeons, they all had
unique thematic enemies. Unique thematic enemies specific to the area, or dungeon.
And they might show up in later dungeons as like something that was like a mini boss in one dungeon might show up as a normal enemy later on, and that's fine. But there's enemies that you don't encounter until the last dungeon in Ocarina of Time, like those flying Anubis, I think they're called. You don't see those anywhere until you reach the Spirit Temple, which, depending on the order you do the dungeons, is the last one. Yeah. And just so many different types of enemies. Why did it have to be constructs everywhere again?
Well, I've just realized I've changed my mind. I said I just wanted atmosphere. I just wanted bigger dungeons. I just wanted them to be divine beasts but better. That's basically what I said. No, I was wrong. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. And it's telling that other people that are also very pro open world, very pro open air in every other situation are still like, maybe we could have used limitations here. Maybe here we could have used limitations. People like Limcube, a lot of people I see online are thinking the dungeons are among the weaker parts of the game. And I'm telling you, limitations are good sometimes. And this is one of those situations where it's time to take stuff away and make it like dungeons was before. This seems...
Yeah, and sometimes you didn't even know you were in a dungeon, really. Like, the Spirit Temple was, for me, such a big disappointment where I was like, oh...
It's like, whoa, Spirit Temple. Oh, boss fight. Oh, that's it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, so the part I did before that, where I assembled the robot, that was actually also sort of part of the dungeon, but I didn't realize I was in a dungeon environment until we reached the Spirit Temple. And when I saw Spirit Temple, I was like, already imagining, oh, so cool, the Spirit Temple, because you know that name, and you walk in and it's just a rock'em sock'em robot, and then it's done.
It is kind of funny though when you look at speedrunners and stuff, because the game follows a similar thing to Breath of the Wild, where like if you haven't beaten those fights, you gotta fight them before Ganondorf. But it's hilarious because I didn't realize to the extent of how much they do that. Because I was watching a speedrun, it was like, oh, Colgera, Marbled Goma, and then the other two fights, and then after that, I was like, oh no, you fight the robot that's corrupted by the gloom. Well, that's pretty cool because you're fighting it as Link and not with the robot. But then after that, you also fight that Phantom Ganon from Hyrule Castle, and it's like, oh my gosh, you have to, you have to do that. So I was watching, and I was thinking, wait, so you have to do 6 different fights before you go to Ganondorf? That's crazy. Like, imagine someone's like, oh, I'm finally done. And they see Phantom Ganon, they're like, oh, come on. But yeah, you have to do 6 different fights. So I'm thinking, wow, speedrunners are going to really have fun with that.
I think if speedrunners don't get the paraglider, and so they have to kill Colgera in the first fall because they don't have the paraglider.
yeah, it's interesting. Speedrunners will do the whole game without the paraglider, which I find very fascinating.
That's funny.
Because you get it only after the towers, but everyone's running straight to Hyrule Castle. They're using their own tricks to negate the fall damage and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, for me,
look, the dungeons were good. Like I said, honestly, I think I've realized this is as good as you could possibly want for an open air.
If it's an open air like gameplay thing, without restrictions,
this is it. This is the best Nintendo can do. I don't think they can do better. I think this is as good as they listen to our like literally everything. It's like I personally talked to them and they listened to everything I had to say and tried to appease me. And I feel bad because they did everything I asked, and now I'm like, no, still not good enough. In fact, just throw it all away. Let's do classic dungeons again.
Yeah, just do the restrictive.
Pretend it's a gigantic
again.
shrine.
because it's clearly like in Elden Ring you had huge dungeons too, but obviously in a game like that you're supposed to feel limited. You're supposed to be heavy, grounded. You cannot do all this crazy stuff because you would completely destroy the whole combat system. It's all about combat. And in fact, with Elden Ring, I actually had the opposite, where I felt disappointed. Like, oh, so pulling switches and making a ladder fall down, that's the best they have. That's all there is. There's no crazy puzzles. There's no. They can do more with this engine than just this, right? Come on. It felt like they did the bare minimum when it came to the actual dungeon design. It was all about combat and just navigating your way through and getting to the end. It was just a race to the finish, basically. And I felt like they can do more with this.
You wanted
Like,
those
sure,
dungeons to be more like classic dungeons too.
well, yeah, in a way, I just felt like if you're gonna make, because like you said, there was already kind of like a bit of a complaint with Elden Ring where the people pointed out like, oh, they're just using the same animations and the same. And after playing Dark Souls 3, after Elden Ring, I felt like, yeah, they actually did do the bare minimum when it came to advancing the like, for example, Sekiro felt like a really big evolution. Like suddenly you had a grappling hook and you had parrying, and
Well,
it wasn't.
I think I have a different take than you on this issue, because this is something I've actually thought about a lot, especially when it relates to Breath of the Wild. So Elden Ring and Breath of the Wild have a lot of similarities in that they're both games that were more linear back in the past and transitioned into this open world formula to critical success, like tons of success. The difference, though, is that the legacy dungeons that Elden Ring had were important because they were literally like the divine beasts, but good. They were like so the complaint in Breath of the Wild from a lot of people, maybe even including myself, is that, hey, we didn't have any dungeons. The divine beasts aren't what we were accustomed. It's nice that you have all of these new gameplay mechanics and all this new stuff, but at least for the dungeons, maybe you could have gone back and stuck to your roots. And Elden Ring did do that. The legacy dungeons are their roots. Like legacy dungeons are exactly like the dungeons that people liked, where it was more about yes, fights, but also navigating the area, like figuring out where this stuff is.
Linear environment.
Yeah, they were linear. And you're expected to like scrounge. If you want to find all the items, you scrounge around and you find all the secret passages. And Stormvale had lots of that. Leyendale had lots of that. Volcano Manor, you might not even find that like on your first playthrough. You might not even know that it's there. A whole dungeon just hidden away. They don't care if you find it or not. Screw you.
Yeah.
And so like the Elden Ring, this is one thing that I think elevates Elden Ring above Breath of the Wild, at least in their initial foray into the open world formula. Elden Ring did the open world formula, did it well, but it also kept the things that preserved its identity as an old type of Soul game. Breath of the Wild didn't. And this is the main part of my argument. I always felt, why? you could have done everything that you did and also included like proper dungeons. And that's continued to be my stance even now, especially after playing Tears of the Kingdom.
Well, to clarify, I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy the legacy dungeons in Elden Ring. Obviously, I did. I thought they were amazing. I just felt like they could have done a little bit more to spice them up a little bit.
Innovated more on their formulas.
Yeah. Like, for example, that part where you put a little item and the whole tower flips upside down. That was really cool. And I felt like they could have done a little bit more with like that kind of stuff, whereas most of the legacy dungeons were just kicking ladders down and pulling a switch, and that's it. And I guess I'm like, well, even Elden Ring or even the Souls games have to evolve a little bit, and they could have maybe.
It's funny that you mentioned that tower flipping, because that's what happened in Stone Tower in Majora's Mask. So it's
Majora's Mask,
it's like, oh, if only this game was more like classic dungeons.
So the same way Elden Ring could have maybe, at least for me, spiced it up a little bit. I think Tears of the Kingdom did too little to innovate. You know, it is a new approach to dungeons, and maybe some people will really enjoy it. Who knows? Maybe I'll enjoy it a few years from now. Because I do want to clarify real quick for your audience and for my sake as well. Even though I am being very negative about the game, generally speaking, I do really love the game, first of all. And second, it may grow on me a lot more.
I've said a lot of positive
Skyward
things. We've all said a lot of positive things throughout the cycle. Like we're getting it all out there. We're just
yeah.
talking.
Plus, this is a recording of this moment right now. The game has been out for barely 3 weeks, so it's not like I'm only human. I used to hate Skyward Sword, and now it's in my top 5. So go figure. You know, things might change. Maybe I can overlook the problems I have with the story over the years, and that could all change. Maybe not, but we'll see.
Or maybe you'll all realize that we're right all along. We'll see.
I think it's good though. I think it's really productive to voice your criticisms, because that's one problem I've had with a lot of other franchises where the fan base is too committed, and I'm like, you should be demanding more, or else there's not going to be any change. If you're going to make excuses for the developer, like if we all collectively keep arguing and saying, no, Pokemon looks just fine, then they're never going to change. They're never going to put in the extra effort to make those games actually look like proper games. And instead, you're going to keep getting these half-assed graphics. Because
I don't play Pokemon games. And at this
no
point,
matter how much you love Pokemon, there is no excuse for the way they look.
at this point, I don't want to get into the series because every single Pokemon fan talks the way you do that I know. Like every single one of them is just constantly upset at Nintendo for the handling of Pokemon. If it is Nintendo, I don't even know if Nintendo does Pokemon.
Oh, I've actually experienced the opposite, where everybody seems to be completely content with it. And I'm like, well, no matter how much you love the gameplay loop, they could have easily made this game look better. Because we have Breath of the Wild, we have Xenoblade 3, we know the Switch can handle games that look like that. So why do games like Scarlet and Violet and the other game, what was it called?
Arceus. Legends Arceus.
Yeah, why do they look so empty, and so why is there so much pop in, and why do the textures look so weird? Like
I was fine. Well, the thing about like Legends Arceus specifically, I was like, okay, well, the game doesn't look the greatest, but like it is that gameplay loop that's so interesting and so addicting, because it was the first time they kind of went with that direction. I got really disappointed though when they had announced the Scarlet and Violet, and I'm like, okay, but it kind of looks the exact same as Legends Arceus. It feels like there's been no like work put into the visuals there. So that's
which was like the main criticism of Arceus, but because they know people will buy it anyway, they're not going to change it. If everybody put their fist down when Arceus came out and said, yes, the game is fun, but gosh darn, like, couldn't you really do a little bit better on the graphics? Because this genuinely looks like a PS2 game. It really just does. The way the tiling works on the water and the draw distance, it just looks so primitive. And I don't know. I think it boils down to the same thing I said at the very beginning: is it's okay to criticize Tears of the Kingdom for wanting to have it run on stronger hardware.
I only criticize the things I like. If I didn't care about the thing, like, why would I say anything? Like, if I didn't care about the thing,
yeah,
like, why would I bother expressing an opinion in that direction? I only care about
I fully agree.
I only criticize the things that I love, and Zelda's something I love a lot.
Yeah, and I think it benefits all of us if we criticize things. Of course, if you're just going to be nitpicking just to hate it, that's a different story. But I'm not hating on Tears of the Kingdom. I like I said, I really enjoy the game, but I enjoy it, and I know it could have been even better.
Okay, I think that's probably a good place to stop because we've been doing this for 4 hours and I didn't clear it with either of you if we were going to go for this long. It just,
Oh man, my voice is totally destroyed.
yeah, I really didn't expect to go on this long, but it looks like we had a lot to vent about. All right, well, Tears of the Kingdom was great. Thanks everybody for watching.